The Wizard, the Wolf, and the Sun. Celeste Magnolia. Summary. Harry Potter is twice orphaned by the time he's 9 years old. When his Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon die in a car crash before his 9th birthday, he's sent with his cousin Dudley to live with Aunt Marge. Unfortunately, Aunt Marge drops him off at what she thinks is an orphanage, leaving Harry in the care of Children's Services. A year later, Remus Lupin comes looking for his best friend's son, to check on his welfare. When he finds Harry missing, he asks for his father's help in getting Harry to safety and family. As Remus, Lyle, and Harry navigate their new family dynamics, they are challenged by all parts of the wizarding world, and by the mysterious events that follow with Harry's years at Hogwarts. Chapters will alternate between Harry POV and Remus POV, unless otherwise stated. Canon-compliant relationships. Part 1 covers 1990 to 1994, including the year before Harry's first year at Hogwarts through the end of Canon's Prisoner of Azkaban. Complete. Part 2, underway as of the 15th of June, 2022. See a changing pack. Notes. The first chapter features child neglect / abuse. None of it is graphic or violent in nature, but proceed with caution. Trauma and psychological child abuse / neglect ahead. See the end of the work for more notes. Chapter 1, Unwanted. Chapter text. Harry Potter woke with a start. The sharp raps at the door startled him out of what had been a pleasant, recurring dream. This time, he was being rescued by a big, bearded man who rode a motorbike. Whenever the 8-year-old had pleasant dreams like this that someone came looking for him, wanting him, he tried to hang on to the pleasant feelings as long as possible, as they were fleeting. They were only dreams, anyway. Get up, boy. Uncle Vernon's insistent holler made Harry groan. He reached for his glasses, placing the cheap frames on his nose and ears, followed by tugging at the string to light up his small space. A spider scurried off, and Harry sighed. The cupboard under the stairs always had at least one spider. He reached for the first available shirt, a blue button-down that was 3 times too large for him. He rolled up the sleeves, but it did little to fit him any better. He tied off the front of the shirt, but it didn't help, either. Harry long accepted that he would always look a little ridiculous. The first pair of trousers were also big, but with concentration, he'd been able to take one of Dudley's old belts and bore new holes in it. With the extra holes, the belt was tight enough to wrap around his waist twice, but it made it so that the trousers would stay on his waist without falling down. He emerged from the cupboard, trying to smooth down the unruly hair on his head. That was a pointless effort, too, but he had to at least appear as if he was trying to look decent, as his Aunt Petunia would say. "Mind the bacon and make sure it doesn't burn," Petunia said shrilly, already fussing over Dudley, who gave Harry a simper from where he sat. Dudley's fat bottom hung over both sides of the chair, but neither Petunia nor Vernon seemed to care. Harry moved the bacon around on the pan, trying to keep from burning his fingers again. He knew he was hardly an average 8-year-old, but then again, he thought wryly, neither was Dudley. Most 8-year-old at their school didn't look like spoiled puffer fish, like Dudley, or like string beans in elephant skin, like Harry. "Why can't I go?" Dudley complained, again. For once, Harry agreed with Dudley. An evening without all 3 Dursleys sounded delightful, even if he would be sent to spend time with the dreadfully dull Mrs. Fig and her plethora of cats. "This event isn't for little boys," Aunt Petunia said. "Your daddy is getting an award from his workplace, Duddekins. He's getting a promotion and a raise, and we'll be going on holiday soon, just the 3 of us." 3. Harry said, feeling small. On holiday. Though he would never admit it, Harry felt a pang of jealousy that they would be going away to enjoy themselves, wherever they went. "Yes, 3," Aunt Petunia snapped. "Disney World is no place for freaks." Dudley smirked gleefully. "They have rides and a castle, don't they, Mummy? Isn't it the happiest place on earth?" "That's right, son," Uncle Vernon said proudly. "Nothing but the best for us." Harry bit back the jealousy and the tears that were threatening to escape. He had heard of Disney World. Only the wealthiest children at their school had been able to go, and they would show pictures of their holidays in class. "You'll be with our neighbor, Mrs. Fig," Aunt Petunia said coolly. "A week without you will do all of us good, won't it?" Harry nodded weakly as he pushed the bacon on the pan. The Dursleys would spend time in a sunny, warm place with fun, and he would spend time with Mrs. Figg and her cats. Perhaps, if he was very lucky, she might let him watch a program on her telly of his choosing. Aunt Petunia fussed over Dudley again, before going back upstairs. Uncle Vernon was breathing heavily behind his newspaper while Dudley smirked at Harry. "Who would even want to go on holiday with you?" Dudley sneered. "No one wants a freak around." Harry bit the inside of his cheek, fighting back the tears. It was then that the window above the kitchen sink shattered. Uncle Vernon placed his newspaper down, going from red to purple in the face in seconds. You insufferable freak of nature. You did this to us." Vernon bellowed, little droplets of spittle spraying Harry and his glasses. "Get to your cupboard, now." Harry didn't need to be told twice. He didn't know how or why it happened. The glass just shattered. He wasn't standing anywhere near the window, but somehow, Uncle Vernon managed to blame it on Harry. These things were always blamed on Harry. It was several hours before Harry was acknowledged again. He was starving by then, having missed the chance to eat breakfast in the morning. He felt faint and weak from the lack of food, although it wasn't an entirely new feeling. He often felt hungrier than he cared to admit to anyone. A sharp rap at the door was followed by Aunt Petunia swinging it open and dragging Harry out by the ear. "You will be working all summer to work off the expense of repairing that window," Uncle Vernon said, still purple in the face, as Aunt Petunia moved aside. "The lawn, the garden, the scrubbing, everything until every last bit is paid off. Do you hear, boy?" "Yes, Uncle Vernon," Harry said. He would be working all summer regardless, Harry thought glumly, so it wasn't a true punishment. "You will also behave tonight for your Aunt March. Eat dinner now before she gets here. You'll be spending the evening in the cupboard to keep out of her way," he hissed. Harry's heart sank. An evening in the cupboard wasn't out of the ordinary, but Aunt March wasn't the type to let him stay inside the cupboard and mind his own business. No, Marge would find a way to torture him. Harry looked down at his feet, as Aunt Petunia whacked his shoulder to sit at the table. An open can of soup greeted him, alongside 2 slices of bread. Harry didn't bother asking Petunia to heat the soup up for him. Instead, he dug in with a spoon in one hand, trying not to get any more dishes dirty. In minutes the contents of the soup and slices of bread had disappeared. Harry had been ravenous, and the soup hadn't been enough. It was something, and so Harry hid his hunger. A loud pounding at the door marked Aunt March's arrival. Harry winced. Dudley was already at the front of the house, waiting for Aunt March's affections. For a few slobbery kisses, Dudley would earn a £10 note. Harry would earn nothing but her disdain. He had come to expect disdain or indifference from everyone. "You're still here," Marge said flatly, as soon as she appeared in the kitchen. Harry wasn't sure how to respond to this, and ventured, "Yes." "Don't say yes in that ungrateful tone," Marge barked. "Good of my brother and his wife to take you in. If you'd landed on my doorstep it would have been straight to the orphanage with you." Harry's breath caught in his throat. As if he needed another reminder of how very unwanted he was. Vernon and Petunia busied themselves with their last-minute preparations, reminding their precious Duddekins how loved he was and how they'd miss him that evening. Harry looked on with disgust and that familiar pang of jealousy at the scene. How he would have loved to have anyone remotely interested in him. "Stop staring," Marge barked, startling Harry. "It's impolite to stare, but who could guess anything else from a brat like you?" Harry looked downcast as Vernon and Petunia said their final goodbyes to Dudley. They gave one last glare at Harry, and shut the door behind them. "Mina Phipoo," Marge cooed, bringing Dudley into her large arms. "I have a special present for you." Dudley was practically salivating as Marge reached into her enormous handbag and produced a wrapped box. An early 9th birthday present for the most worthy boy in town. Dudley snatched the present from Marge's hands and unwrapped it gleefully to find a Nintendo Entertainment System within. Harry's eyes watered. The new gaming system was new to Britain, and few children had access to one. Even Dudley's eyes had grown wide when he saw that it had come with a Mario game, and Marge gave Dudley large, wet kisses to his fat head upon seeing him so happy. Harry bit back any hope that he could play the new game. Such a luxury would never be permitted. Marge saw Harry from the corner of her eye and sneered. "You, boy, fix me a drink while Dudley sets up his new toy." Dudley smirked as he began unpacking the contents of the box and setting cables up to the telly. It took well over a half hour for Dudley to connect the system. In that time, Harry had prepared drinks for both Marge and Dudley, and tried to avoid getting nipped at by Marge's bulldog. "Can I be excused, please?" Harry finally said to Marge, now longing for his cupboard. Whenever Dudley got something new and fabulous, he had the irritating tray to show it off to Harry and dangle it before his eyes, as if to taunt him into wanting more. Harry had learned long ago not to rise to meet the taunting, it only hurt worse when he was punished for wanting more. "Make him stay," Dudley simpered. "Dad always makes him stay to show him what he could get if he was a good boy like me." Marge turned around as Dudley flashed Harry a nasty grin. "Stay, boy," Marge said, in the same tone as she used for her bulldog. "Stand there and don't get out of my sight. Can't have any of that funny business here." Harry did as he was told and stood in the spot against the wall while Dudley started playing the game. Dudley was terrible at it and Harry was sure he could do better. His hand twitched towards the telly, wanting to try for himself. Marge noticed. Only good boys get to play. Harry would never be good enough for the Dursleys. He would never get to play. The night continued with Marge settling into the stuffed armchair, reading a tawdry novel, while Dudley made noises at the telly and the game. Harry stood still, hoping desperately for a chance to play. Maybe, just maybe, Harry thought, if he was good and still enough he might get a chance. Hours passed and Harry's feet began to hurt from standing still. Marge was snoring loudly in her chair, the book propped on her chest, and Dudley was engrossed in the Mario game. Harry took the chance and padded quietly back to the cupboard, shutting himself in for the night. It was nights like tonight that made Harry wish more than anything else that his parents hadn't died in a car crash all those years ago. He wished anyone would come take him from the Dursleys. No one ever did. When Harry awoke, there was commotion outside the cupboard. Most mornings at number 4, Privet Drive, did not have much in the way of commotion. Uncle Vernon or Aunt Petunia would rap on the door, and Dudley might storm down the stairs to bring dust onto Harry, but there were never any more voices. At that moment, there was wailing and the sounds of several people talking at once, confusing Harry. Perhaps someone was coming to get him after all. Perhaps the wailing came from the Dursleys, for realizing they finally loved Harry, and would miss him. He slowly opened the cupboard door, finding 2 uniformed men staring at him in disbelief. Harry felt uneasy under their stare, but they were wearing police uniforms. Aunt Petunia had often told him that the more he misbehaved, the more he was likely to get in trouble with the law, and they would lock him away where he would rot alone in prison. He stared, speechless, wondering if they were taking him away. "There's another kid here," one asked, looking down at Harry. "Who are you?" Harry, sir," he squeaked. "Harry Potter." "Didn't realize there was another kid here," one officer frowned. "Let Kimball know." The other officer went out into the kitchen. Harry saw that Marge was crying, her face splotchy and tear-stained. Dudley was nowhere in sight, but Harry could hear the Mario game still going. A woman stepped out of the kitchen and looked at Harry, frowning. "There's another kid. She didn't mention anything. Is it a friend?" "Said his name was Harry Potter," the first officer said. "Right." Harry nodded, terrified of what was happening. The woman bent down to look at Harry closely. "Are you a friend of the Dursleys, Harry?" Harry shook his head. "They're my aunt and uncle, Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon. Dudley's my cousin." A look of comprehension dawned over their faces and the woman nodded to the 2 officers, who went out into the kitchen to be with the splotchy, crying Marge. "Hi, Harry. I'm Mrs. Kimball. Why don't you sit down?" Harry looked around, finding nowhere to sit but his cot in the cupboard. Kimball's eyes widened slightly as he opened the door and sat down. "There's no easy way to say this, Harry, but I'm afraid your aunt and uncle have passed away." Harry stared at Mrs. Kimball in shock. "Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon dead?" The woman took Harry's silence as a signal to continue. "They were on their way from an event last night and they got into a car crash. They didn't make it." "I'm sorry, Harry." Harry furrowed his brows together. A second set of parental figures, well, not quite parents, if he were being honest, considering Petunia and Vernon had succumbed to car crashes. Maybe cars weren't as safe as they were made out to be, Harry thought grimly. Are you okay, Harry? It's okay to cry. Harry stared at Mrs. Kimble in shock. He knew he should have felt something upon hearing his aunt and uncle had just died, but he found himself not caring at all. He felt nothing at all. It might just be shock, Mrs. Kimble said kindly. Would you like to join your cousin? He's playing a game. Harry shook his head. Dudley was insufferable when he was elated. Harry shuddered to think of what a grieving Dudley might be like. Okay. We're getting things sorted out, but we'll be back soon. Harry nodded and sat back on his cot, wondering what would happen next. As far as he knew, he had no other family besides Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon. All his grandparents had died before he was born. His father had been an only child, hadn't he? Harry realized he knew little of his extended family. Exhausted and apprehensive, Harry fell back into the cot. Hopefully someone better would come for him. They just had to. Within a week, Harry's life had somehow gotten worse. He had stood next to Dudley at Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon's funeral, serving as a human punching bag for the grieving Dudley. No one batted an eye. Dudley was an orphan, after all. Aunt Marge had no issue reminding all of the extended Dursley relatives that her Pornifipu Dudus was an orphan and needed extra special care and attention. No one remembered Harry was an orphan too. The officers and Mrs. Kimble had decided that because Harry had no other available relations, Harry should remain with his only living relative, Dudley Dursley. Little did Harry know that Dudley would be taken in by none other than Aunt Marge. Thus it was that a day after the funeral, the caseworker called Mrs. Kimble took Harry and Dudley from their previous home in Little Whinging up to Bedfordshire. Dudley's things had already been taken from Privet Drive by Aunt Marge in a large truck, as he had many possessions. Harry's things fit neatly into his rucksack, which he kept with him. Harry was mildly interested in the countryside landscape as they drove up from Surrey to Bedfordshire. Aunt Marge bred bulldogs. Harry wasn't excited to live with Aunt Marge, but he hoped that having more space in the country would make it bearable. He had never been up to Marge's home, but felt a hint of excitement as the streets gave way to greener spaces. It didn't look so bad from the car. "Ready, boys?" Mrs. Kimble said. She was turning into a lane with a wooden sign that read Marge's Majesties. Dudley sniffled. Harry almost felt sympathy for him, but between the extended Dursley clan and well-wishers from their school, Dudley had received an endless pile of gifts in sympathy. Harry had been forgotten. Marge was waiting on the front steps of her cottage, her current bulldog wheezing next to her. Marge was teary but smiling as the car came into her view. Harry was feeling increasingly apprehensive. The car came to a stop, and Mrs. Kimble stepped out to greet Aunt Marge. Dudley ambled out of the car, waddling right into Aunt Marge's waiting arms. Harry appeared behind Dudley, coming into view just moments later. "What is he doing here?" Marge barked, looking disdainfully at Harry. "He's not my nephew. We share no blood." Mrs. Kimble bit her lip, glancing nervously back at Harry. "We thought it best if Harry stayed with his only living relative, Dudley. You don't mind terribly taking him in?" Aunt Marge looked as if she minded very much having Harry anywhere near her. Unexpectedly, Marge broke into a wicked grin. "I'll take the boy." "We can make room," Marge said, sneering. She glanced over at the doghouse, which led to a pit forming in Harry's stomach. Mrs. Kimble sighed in relief. "Good. Dudley, Harry, so sorry for your losses. If you need anything, you can let me know, okay?" Harry nodded, and Dudley went right into the cottage, hollering about his new Nintendo and where it had been set up. Marge stood tall and proud, watching Mrs. Kimble get back into her car and drive away, leaving a path of dust from her wheels as she drove out to the main road again. "You, boy, you sleep there," Marge said, pointing to the doghouse. Harry winced. The doghouse was no bigger than the cupboard, and it didn't have anything to sleep on but straw. "I can't sleep inside?" Harry asked, biting back the tears that were forming. He thought the cupboard was bad, but sleeping outdoors like an actual dog was a bit much. "Bad boys sleep outside," Marge sneered. Good boys get inside privileges. Isn't that right, Ripper? She petted the wheezing bulldog, who licked his nose and growled up at Harry. Harry stared in disbelief, but Marge wasn't backing down. She clucked at Ripper, who followed Marge into the cottage. Harry was now alone, his rucksack in hand, the sun beating down on him. There was little else he could do. He thought of running away, but where would he go? He had tried running away once from the Dursleys, but their neighbor had found him and Harry had been locked in the cupboard for an entire weekend. He didn't dare think what Marge would do if he tried running away. Luckily, Marge had a small grove of trees near the doghouse, and Harry found a shady tree to sit under. He held his rucksack in his arms, and opened it to take out the only heirloom he'd been given. Somehow, Aunt Petunia had kept the blanket he'd arrived in after his parents had died in 1981. The blanket had been removed from Aunt Petunia's closet and given to Harry. It was soft and comforting. If Harry inhaled deeply enough, he could almost remember something. Almost. After a few minutes of clutching the blanket to his thin chest, Harry stuffed it back into his rucksack. He was hungry and hot, but there was nothing he could do. He sometimes thought dying would be better than the existence he'd been given. He even felt like returning to the Dursleys. He sometimes went hungry there, but during the school year, he would have enough to eat and somewhere to be on weekdays where he could get some distance from his relatives. A few tears fell down Harry's cheeks. He had never felt so alone. It took 2 days for Marge to speak to Harry again. To his immense relief, she'd brought out a pitcher of water and 2 loaves of bread and left it in front of the doghouse. He was dirty and lonely, but at least he was no longer thirsty or hungry. He relieved himself out in the small grove of trees, feeling more like an animal than human. On the second day, another hot, sunny summer afternoon, Marge barked at Harry to come inside. His heart leapt in his chest. Perhaps his punishment was over, and he would earn a place inside the cottage. "Wash up," Marge ordered. "Clean yourself. We're going out." Harry brightened to hear they were going somewhere. He eagerly went inside the frilly bathroom, covered in pictures of bulldogs, and gladly cleaned his face and body. His clothes were dirty, but it felt good to have a clean face for the first time in days. Marge was waiting outside with a fresh pair of clean clothes. They were still Dudley's old clothes, but they were clean. Harry felt immensely grateful, and immediately put on the clean clothes. He felt human again, freshly washed and clothed. "Where are we going?" Harry asked tentatively. "To the shops." "You'll see," Marge cackled. "Get your things and get into the car." "All my things?" "My rucksack. Everything." Marge smirked, and Harry felt his stomach twist again. He wasn't sure if it was hunger or fear, but he frankly didn't care. He went to the doghouse and gathered the few things he had. He had been sleeping under his old baby blanket the last 2 nights. It wasn't clean anymore, but it provided a small measure of comfort. There was nothing else in the doghouse that belonged to him, and so he took his dirtied rucksack with him to Marge's car. Dudley was waiting for them, smirking. Dudley took the front seat with Marge while Harry sat in the back. She was in a surprisingly good mood, as was Dudley. Harry didn't think that was a good sign. They drove for almost an hour through more unrelated terrain. The silence in the car was broken by the occasional chuckle from Marge. She had the same maniacal gleam in her eye that Uncle Vernon did when Harry was suffering. They finally stopped in front of a weather-worn building with a sign that read St. Christopher's Children's Services, whatever that meant. "Dudus, you're a good boy. Stay in the car while I take care of the brat," Marge said, still gleeful. She turned around and glared at Harry. "Get out, boy." Harry took his rucksack and got out of the car. Marge shoved him forward towards the entrance, and the two went into the building. "Hello, you must be Miss Dursley," a tall, thin woman greeted. "This is Harry." "It is. We just can't take it anymore. He's a menace to himself and to us. I wouldn't be doing this if I had no other option." Aunt Marge cried thick, crocodile tears at the thin woman, who looked on with sympathy. Harry was utterly bewildered. The thin woman patted Marge awkwardly and murmured a few words in her ear. Marge nodded, and placed a few papers in the woman's hand. Without a second glance, Marge stepped back out of the building and went into her car. Dudley was beaming, and Harry saw Marge laughing as they drove away, leaving Harry alone. "Hello, Harry. I'm Miss Morrow. Come with me." Harry stared in disbelief. Had Marge really just left him here? Miss Morrow stared expectantly at Harry, and he felt he had no choice but to follow another door. The decoration was sparse, fluorescent lights flickering slightly above them in the corridor. Miss Morrow led Harry into a small office, where he was directed to sit on a threadbare couch. "Now, I understand you know why you're here," Miss Morrow began, businesslike. Harry shook his head. Miss Morrow's forehead creased. "You don't know why you're here, Harry?" "No. Aunt Marge said we were going out and we're here now." He sat in confusion as Miss Morrow muttered something about developmentally delayed and special needs. "I'll explain for you, sweetie," Miss Morrow said slowly, smiling widely as she did so. Harry felt confused, and the woman before him simpered. "I understand you had some problems at home. Sometimes things happen to you that hurt yourself or others, don't they?" Harry scratched his head in confusion. Sometimes things did happen. Just recently he'd broken a window. That's what Uncle Vernon said, even if he had been nowhere near the window. He supposed that could have hurt someone. Miss Morrow kept her fake smile on her face, and Harry nodded, thinking it better to agree. "I thought so, Harry. Sometimes when children behave like this, they need special help. That's where we come in. We're here to help you." Harry said nothing, and pushed up his glasses on the bridge of his nose. He supposed he could use some help. He was hungry. The next hour was spent with Miss Morrow rattling off information at Harry. He was going to live in a children's home, not an orphanage. Miss Morrow was emphatic on that point, and he would have foster parents to care for him and make sure he got the help he needed. He would have a foster brother and sister, and they would learn together. He would also see a special doctor or two who could help him be better. Harry didn't know what else to say or do, so he nodded along. Nothing made sense, but ever since Petunia and Dursley had died, his world had been turned upside down. Once Miss Morrow had finished speaking, she led Harry back out to the reception area, where a stout woman was waiting for him. "You must be Harry. I'm Mrs. Beadle, but you can call me Miss Eleanor. I'll be your foster mom." "Hi, Miss Eleanor," Harry said, feeling unsure of himself. "I'm going with you now." Miss Eleanor nodded, and after exchanging a few words with Miss Morrow, Harry was now being led to a different car. Just 10 minutes later, Miss Eleanor had stopped in front of a small home. "Bart, Nina, and Michael are all waiting for us. Bart is my husband and will be your foster dad. You can call him Mr. Bart. Nina and Michael are your foster sister and brother, although they are biological siblings. They're a little older than you, but you'll fit right in, I'm sure." Harry was apprehensive again, but as he was being allowed inside the house right away, he had to admit it was better than Aunt Marge's. Miss Eleanor led him inside the home, where a tall, gangly man was standing with two older children. "Hello, Harry. I'm Mr. Bart," the man greeted, holding out his hand. Harry took it and shook it lightly. "This is Nina. She's 11. This is her brother, Michael. He's 14. I'm Harry. I'm going to be 9 soon," Harry said, still unsure. Michael and Nina both towered over him. Michael reminded Harry of one of the bigger boys in the neighborhood who often picked on younger kids. Michael and Nina eyed Harry warily, and after a few cursory remarks, Mr. Bart led Harry up to a small bedroom. It held 2 single beds, 2 nightstands, and 2 dressers. One bed was neatly made, while the other was haphazardly put together. Harry pressed his nose against the window in the room, delighted that he had a proper bedroom with a window, even if it looked like he was sharing with Michael. "This is better than the doghouse and the cupboard combined," Harry said, smiling softly at Mr. Bart. "Much better." Mr. Bart frowned. He had papers in his hand and flipped through them, a flicker of understanding crossing his expression. "Yes, of course this is better," Mr. Bart said kindly. "Come down for lunch whenever you're ready." Harry's eyes widened. He was being offered food, too. A bedroom with a window, and food. They hardly knew him. With a glimmer of hope, Harry dropped his rucksack on the floor, breathing a sigh of relief. Maybe Marge had finally done him an act of service by letting him go. Harry's stay with Bart, Eleanor, Michael, and Nina, however, was short-lived. His 9th birthday had come and gone without much fanfare. Miss Eleanor had made him a small cake, the first Harry had ever seen in his memory. It wasn't a good cake, but it was a cake all the same. That had been only a few weeks after his arrival. Right around his 9th birthday, Michael and Nina, the other 2 foster children, began testing Harry. He wasn't sure why they were in foster care, but he noticed that no sharp objects existed in the home. When Miss Eleanor or Mr. Bart cooked, the knives were kept safely stowed, under lock and key. At first, Harry endured probing questions from the sibling pair. He was told that if he was with them, he too was unwanted by most people. Harry didn't like being called unwanted. Nina and Michael were deceptively charming. They brought Harry little gifts sometimes in exchange for his silence. He wasn't sure what he was supposed to be silent about at first. When things disappeared from the home, or things went wrong, Harry understood that his silence meant he was blamed for whatever Nina and Michael had stolen or done. It culminated on Halloween, when Harry was somehow caught stealing Nina's sweets. She had told him to get it, but Michael had convinced Bart and Eleanor that Harry was stealing. The number of injustices against Harry had grown to be too much to bear. Although he tried to be grateful that he had his own bed to sleep in and enough food to eat, when Michael wasn't guilting Harry into giving him half his portions, it seemed as if Nina and Michael were both conspiring against Harry. They were cleverer, more ruthless, and more resourceful than Dudley had ever been. Harry almost longed for Dudley to share his space with under Mr. Bart and Miss Eleanor's care. When Harry had been accused of stealing Nina's Halloween sweets, something in him snapped, and the entirety of Nina's returned sweets, which included Harry's own, was set aflame. They had all yelped in fear, and Harry was blamed for trying to hurt Nina or even set the home on fire. The next day, Harry had a new placement with a different family. Harry's second placement lasted from the beginning of November until February. He was placed in a home with 3 other children, all of whom took delight in their new, young foster brother. The foster siblings were all younger than Harry, to his surprise, and he enjoyed spending time with them. Their foster parents weren't as thrilled with Harry and made it their mission to learn everything that was wrong with him. Harry spent hours in front of doctors, various specialists, who diagnosed him with varied types of conditions. Whenever something went wrong at the foster home, Harry was blamed. All the incidents had perfectly reasonable explanations, thought Harry. The broken vase was due to the 4-year-old's clumsiness. The toppled Christmas tree. The cat and an enthusiastic 6-year-old. The broken garden window. The other 6-year-old playing with a football. Harry was labeled aggressive, disturbed, psychotic, oppositional, challenged. He could hardly keep up with the labels they gave him. He could hardly keep up with the sudden influx of pills he was ordered to take every morning. No matter what the dosage or combination, Harry hardly felt as if they made a difference. Other than the miserable experience of swallowing a fistful of pills each morning, he felt unchanged. After a broken windshield in February, which Harry could have sworn had been caused by a hailstorm, he was given a 3rd placement, although this one wasn't like the others. Harry's 3rd placement was in Kent. It was in a larger children's home, this one led by a woman called Mrs. Mason. He was one of 5 children there. Like the other homes, he shared a small bedroom and had enough food to eat, but the bedroom at Mrs. Mason's had padded walls. Unusual, but Harry accepted it. He would share it with a boy called Jay. It was still better than the doghouse or the cupboard. None of the foster parents believed him when he mentioned his previous living arrangements. The adults involved in arranging his care would look through his increasingly large stack of paperwork, frown, and look back at him. No matter how insistent he was that he lived in a cupboard for 7 years and spent a few nights in an actual doghouse in Bedfordshire, no adult believed him. They were called delusions or hallucinations. Harry stopped talking about his previous arrangements 2 months into his 3rd placement. The other children liked to remind him that they were all unwanted if they were in Mrs. Mason's care. It wasn't a normal foster home, they told him. Hopeless cases were sent to live with Mrs. Mason. If they failed, they were placed in juvenile centers. Harry was apparently hopeless, but not worthy of a juvenile center yet. He mused on this hopelessness on a sunny May afternoon, sitting alone in the garden. He had long abandoned the idea of spending time with the other children. He had learned months before that interacting with other children led him into trouble. If he stayed alone, he could avoid any problems. That is, until a garden snake came to see him. He was minding his own business, drawing in the dirt with his finger, when the little snake slithered up, hissing about being unable to find anything to eat. Harry's ears perked up, finding it unusual. Perhaps it was another one of those hallucinations the doctors told him he had. The snake stopped in front of Harry, its tongue slipping out momentarily. "I cannot eat you," the little snake said. "I am too big for you," Harry replied. "There are mice in the field. I see them sometimes. Maybe you can go there." "Human speaks. How strange." "You can understand me?" asked Harry, completely mystified. "How? You speak snake. I didn't know I could do that. It's probably not real." Harry sighed, putting his chin in his hands. "I am not real." "What is real?" the snake hissed. "I am hungry. I am real. I know the feeling. I'm not hungry now, but I have been hungry before." "Human eat mice?" "No," Harry said. "When I was very hungry I could have eaten a mouse." "What are you doing?" a voice behind Harry surprised him, and the garden snake slithered away, saying something about finding mice in the field. "I was just," Harry's voice trailed off as he pointed in the direction of the snake. "You were talking to a snake," the boy said flatly. Harry saw the boy, a burly 10-year-old called Jay, crossing his arms over his chest. Jay had a temper to rival Uncle Vernon's, and Harry tried to steer clear from him. Harry shrugged. "The snake talked to me first." "Snakes don't talk to people, you dumbass." "This one talked to me. It was looking for something to eat," Harry insisted. "I told it to find mice in the field." "No wonder you're here. You're a right lunatic, you are. Isn't that why we're all here?" Harry said, miserably. "You said so yourself. We're hopeless. No one wants us." "No one wants you," Jay said coldly. "You're a scrawny freak and you're mental. No one wants a loony." Harry sniffled. He'd been called a freak for many years, and he could hardly deny the truth of Jay's statements. The Dursleys hadn't wanted him. Marge didn't want him. 2 foster placements hadn't wanted him either. "Why would anyone want you?" Harry challenged. "You're angry. No one wants an angry kid. My problem can be treated. Yours can't. You're psycho. I'm not on all those pills." Harry wasn't sure what to say, and so he returned to drawing circles in the dirt. "Yeah, that's what I thought," Jay said smugly. "Now I'll tell Mrs. Mason you think you can talk to snakes. That'll get you more pills, you loon." Jay laughed and ran off in the direction of the house. Harry sighed. He used to dream of someone coming to rescue him from the Dursleys. He didn't dream of anything anymore. Chapter 2, Rescue. Notes. CW, mentions of child abuse / neglect and mental health conditions. Nothing graphic, but be forewarned. As another reminder, this fic alternates between Harry POV and Remus POV. This one's from Remus. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. 30 years old. James Potter would have been 30 years old today, Remus Lupin thought bitterly. Remus stood before the familiar headstone, unvisited for almost a decade. Remus had been living a lonely, itinerant life, drifting from one job to the next, never staying in the same place for more than a few months, lest others learned of his lycanthropy. It was his own recent 30th birthday that drew him back to Godric's Hollow, feeling the weight of his age more painfully than previous years, having been so lonely and melancholy. Remus traced the names on the headstone, Lily and James, the last bit of evidence that his friends had lived and died. Well, no, Remus pondered. They had a son. Remus sat on the cold, muddy grass in front of the Potter's headstone. They'd had a son, Harry. A little boy whose godfather had betrayed him. A boy who was separated from his parents by a cruel wizard. A boy Remus hadn't seen since his first birthday. He felt guilty about that. Harry hadn't been a son to Remus in any capacity, he was neither his father nor his godfather. He had no legal or paternal claim to the boy, but he should have grown up at least knowing Remus as an uncle. Remus could have been another loyal uncle to Harry, but instead was an outcast werewolf, belonging to no one. Perhaps he could change that. Rumors had met Lily's sister Petunia once, at the Potter's wedding. Petunia and her husband, Vernon, were unpleasant people, keeping their distance from anyone deemed suspicious. That meant nearly everyone but those belonging to Lily's family. Maybe, thought Rumors, he could see Harry briefly, if only to say hello and wish the boy well. It's the least I can do for you, James. I'll make sure your son is all right, Rumors said to the headstone, hanging his head. I'll be better for Harry. Rumors dimly recalled the Dursleys' former neighborhood, somewhere near a street called Magnolia Crescent. He hoped that if he apparated there, he could walk around the neighborhood until he spotted Petunia or Vernon. With a turn on his heel, Rumors apparated to Magnolia Crescent, and began his walk. It was a dreary March afternoon, overcast and drizzly. He cast a charm on himself to stay dry, and looked up to the street names. Wisteria Walk became Holly Lane, followed by Privet Drive. The street called Privet Drive jarred something in Rumors' memory, and he sat on a garden bench, trying to recall the number. A batty old woman emerged from number 13 Privet Drive looking suspiciously at Rumors. "Young man, what are you doing on my bench?" the woman accused. "I'm sorry," Rumors apologized, standing quickly. "I'm looking for the Dursleys. I'm afraid I forgot which home was theirs." "The Dursleys? Petunia and Vernon?" the woman asked, furrowing her brow. "What are they to you?" "Petunia's nephew, Harry. I knew his parents and wanted to see him," Rumors said, realizing how awkward he sounded. "They're not there anymore." "Died." "What?" "Harry's dead," Rumors said, anguished. "How?" "Kids aren't dead, just not here anymore," the woman grumbled. "Petunia and Vernon died in a car crash a little while back. Vernon's sister Marge took the boys. Lives up in Bedfordshire and breeds bulldogs." Rumors gasped, wondering what had become of Harry. "You don't know where in Bedfordshire?" "It's all I know," the woman snapped. "Now, off with you. You've no business here anymore." Rumors opened and closed his mouth, worried. Where was Harry Potter? "Thank you for your time," Rumors finally said, turning back towards Magnolia Crescent. He was determined to find the bulldog breeder, Marge Dursley. It took the better part of a week, but after endless confusing, Muggle phone calls and searching, Rumors finally found Marge's Majesty's, a purebred bulldog breeder in Bedfordshire. Certain that there could be no other bulldog breeder belonging to a Marge in the area, Rumors apparated to Bedfordshire, near the address he found. After walking half a mile, a spacious farm, complete with a picturesque cottage, greeted Rumors. A rather large, blond boy was fiddling with a loud electronic device on the front steps. "Hello," Rumors said. "Is this where Marge Dursley lives?" "Yeah, that's my aunt." "You here for puppies?" "Ladies' litter won't be ready for another 2 weeks." "Are you Harry?" The boy scoffed. "That runt. He's long gone." "May I ask who you are?" "Dudley Dursley." "Dudley, can I speak with your aunt, please?" Fine," Dudley said, scowling. Rather than going inside, Dudley hollered. "Aunt Marge. Someone's here to see you." Rumors blinked, startled, as a heavyset woman came wheezing from behind the front door. "What is it, Duddus?" Marge demanded. "You, boy. You here for a pup? Won't be ready for 2 weeks. Still got 2 available. Females half off, males full price." No, I was wondering if you know where Harry Potter is." Marge began laughing hysterically, and Dudley joined in. It was several moments before Marge collected herself, still wheezing from the laughter. "That runt. Long gone. Gave him up when I took Duddus in after my poor brother died," Marge said. "Don't know why Vernon ever took that freak in when his bastard parents died. Shows up on my doorstep with ickle didderkins and I turned him right out. None of that nonsense in this house." Rumors gaped at Marge. "You gave him up? Where is he?" "Hell if I care. Dropped him off at the orphanage St. Christopher's. He's their problem now." Marge cackled. Rumors was horrified by Marge Dursley's apparent disregard for her nephew's cousin. "Can you tell me where St. Christopher's is?" Rumors asked, now panicking in earnest over Harry's well-being. Marge gave him an address in Kent, and Rummus ran off her property to find a place to apparate from. As soon as it was safe, he turned on the spot and appeared before a narrow building. No markers indicated he was at an orphanage, but he went in, hoping for help. Rummus entered to find a stout man filing paperwork into a file cabinet. Morning, how can I help you, sir? Hello, I'm Rummus Lupin. I'm looking for St. Christopher's. It's an orphanage. I must have gotten the wrong address. You've got the right address, but this isn't an orphanage. We're a children's service, the man replied. I'm Roy. Are you here for the posting? No, no. I'm here to find out what happened to my friend's son, Harry. Can you help me? I'm afraid I can't give much information, unless you're a family member or guardian, Roy said, sighing. But I'll see what I can do. What's the surname? Potter. Harry James Potter. His date of birth is the 31st of July, 1980. His parents were Lily and James Potter, of Gardriggs Hollow. His last known guardians were Vernon and Petunia Dursley. Potter, Roy murmured, flipping through his files. Yes, rather peculiar case, that Harry Potter. Roy hummed to himself as he glanced through the paperwork. There's little I can say, seeing as I have no identification for you. Unless you're the boy's family or guardian, I can't do much for you. Is anyone caring for him? Is he safe? I just need to know he's alive and well. He's in the care of Children's Services, so he's fine, sir. Anything else I can help you with? Rummus struggled with himself. Harry was in the care of Children's Services, but it hardly meant he was fine. Rummus felt the pull to investigate for himself to see how Harry was faring in the care of Children's Services. Just one more question, please, Rummus said. If Harry's in the care of Children's Services, does he have a guardian or parent now? Roy stared at Rummus quizzically. No, children who are with us have lost their parents or guardians. They are wards. Orphans, abandoned children, children whose parents have lost custody, that sort of situation. They are no one's children. Rummus asked sadly. Abandoned? Unless they are adopted or fostered, they are in our care. We try to place them, if we can, but it's rare for older children, like your friend's son. Rummus ran a hand through his hair, mulling over the possibilities. So you're saying that if someone adopted or fostered Harry, he would go in their care instead of Children's Services? Yes, sir, that's how it works, Roy said slowly, as if Rummus were impaired. Can just anyone adopt him? Or foster him? Roy frowned. Well, no, not anyone. A prospective adoptive parent should meet some requirements. He rifled through another stack of paperwork, until he pulled out a brochure and gave it to Rummus. Changing a Child's Life, Rummus read aloud. A guide for prospective parents. If you, or someone else, is interested in adopting or fostering a child in our care, that's where to start, Roy said. And, if you're interested in a particular child, you may need to meet additional requirements. If the child is old enough, he or she will have to agree to the adoption as well. Rummus felt a sense of foreboding. Roy had said Harry was a rather peculiar case. If you're serious about adopting or fostering, you'll need your, wife's agreement as well. I'm single, so that won't be a problem, Rummus said hastily. Even if I were thinking of adopting Harry. Roy looked back through Harry's file, and sighed. He rifled through more paperwork, and pulled out another brochure. Before you go through the trouble of the paperwork required for a typical child, it may be helpful to read this, too. Requirements for special needs children, Rummus read aloud again, frowning. He read through the papers, finding anything from behavioral disorders to mental health disorders. Harry is a special needs child. I really couldn't say, Roy said awkwardly. Just think on it. Rummus was growing ever more worried with Harry's situation, despite the terror he felt at the idea of adopting the child. Rather than burst his anxieties on the Children's Services worker, Rummus simply said, "Thank you for your help," and walked out of the once orphanage. 2 weeks later, Rummus was visiting his father, feeling burdened by the weight of the favor he was readying himself to ask the older man. A quick rap on the front door, and Rummus saw his father for the first time in 3 years. "Son, it's good to see you," Lyle Lupin welcomed Rummus into his cottage, which sat just outside Cardiff. "What brings you here?" "Not that I'm unhappy to have you, I'm just surprised. It's been a while. I've been here and there, Rumus said lightly. Job's taking me around. You have a job here now. Yes, and I'd like your help. Lyle looked warily at Rumus, but welcomed him into the familiar cottage, and the two sat in awkward silence in the sitting room. Is it money? You need gold. Rumus shook his head. No, this is an entirely different problem. Well. Lyle clasped his hands, gazing at Rumus. I'd like to adopt a child, and I need stable housing in order to do it, Rumus said, feeling himself grow hot as he realized the ludicrousness of his statement. Adopt a child? You're taking the mickey. What is it, really? I'm not, Dad, Rumus said, running his fingers through his hair, and sighing deeply. You remember my friend, James? Lyle nodded, and Rumus continued. You know he and his wife, Lily, were killed by Voldemort, but their son lived. He let the silence fall, hoping his father would pick up on his train of thought. And you want to adopt their son? Doesn't he already have living arrangements? He must be several years old by now. He'll be 10 in July. He did have living arrangements. He was sent to live with Lily's sister and her family, but the sister and her husband died 2 years ago, leaving behind their son Dudley and Harry. Dudley went to his dad's sister, Marge, and that beast of a woman turned Harry over to Children's Services. Lyle furrowed his brow in confusion. Children's Services. It's what Muggles have now instead of orphanages. They put orphans and endangered children in smaller homes for group care or fostering, to make it more like a family, Rumus said. Harry's been put in a residential center for troubled children, likely due to his accidental magic. At least, that's what I hope. I just don't feel right leaving him there, Dad. He's not your responsibility, Rumus. He was your friend's son, not yours. They didn't make you godfather, did they? No, that was Sirius. Rumus grimaced, remembering Sirius' betrayal. I know I'm not really anything to Harry, but I just have this instinct. They won't even let me see him without getting all this bloody paperwork done. Lyle sat back in the chair, and unclasped his hands. He ran his fingers through his white hair, in the same way Rumus had just done. Is this why you have a job here now, son? Yes, Rumus admitted. I could really use your help. You've got a good heart, son, but see reason, Lyle said gently. I'm a 60-year-old man, and you're a 30-year-old werewolf. Even with your job, how long do you expect it to last? How will we keep a child safe here from you? Have you given this any thought? Rumus winced, his shoulders slumping forward in shame. This is why I thought we could live here. I could use the cellar for my transformations, and you could keep an eye on Harry for the full moon. I'll do everything else. This isn't like getting a pet cat, Lyle retorted. Children are complicated. How will you educate him? How will you prepare for an almost 10-year-old boy? There are Muggle state schools around, Rumus said feebly. Harry could go to one of them until he's ready for Hogwarts. His other expenses. Clothing, food, books. We'll find a way. We managed all right with me, didn't we? Lyle frowned, leaving Rumus with a pit in his stomach. Just come with me, Dad, to see him, Rumus finally said. Even if we get all the paperwork done, Children's Services might not approve me. If they do, Harry has to agree to come here. There's a probationary period before I can adopt him. I need your help, Dad. Please? I'll help you with the paperwork, Lyle reluctantly agreed. I'll meet him with you, but you should prepare yourself for the worst. Harry might be perfectly happy where he is. Thank you, Rumus exhaled, relieved. A few more things you might need to know now. I've concocted a bit of a backstory, involving a Muggle disease called lupus, of all things. Lyle stared back at Rumus, eyes half closed, and sighed once more in defeat. Several more weeks passed between Lyle's agreement and their first meeting with Harry Potter. As Lyle was living with Rumus, rather than the other way around, as Rumus guiltily knew, he too had to pass Muggle background checks to prove that neither he nor Rumus were any danger to children. This included obtaining Muggle paperwork and identification, which had been hastily arranged through a channel in Knockturn Alley. Rummus had persuaded a Muggle healer to provide documentation of an illness called lupus, allowing him to gain and keep Muggle employment without being fired for his illness. Rummus had arrived to the Muggle healer just 2 days after a full moon, explaining his pre- and post-moon symptoms. Barring any other illnesses, the healer had declared Rummus suffered from lupus, causing him to burst into laughter in the healer's office. With documentation to prove his illness, Rummus found a job at a bookstore. The pay wasn't much, but given Rummus' lack of Muggle education, he had little to recommend him to higher-paying work. It was enough to substantiate his paperwork for Harry, for which Rummus was grateful. The cottage outside Cardiff had 3 furnished bedrooms, one of which held a single bed for Harry. It was plain and small, but Rummus hoped it would be good enough for Harry. He wasn't certain what accommodations had been like for the boy at the Dursleys or with children's services, and he hoped Harry would be accepting of the humble arrangement. Rummus and Lyle arrived to Harry's current children's home by Portkey. If all went well, they would take the Portkey back to Cardiff with Harry in tow, or with the promise of bringing him home soon. "How much do you think he knows of our world, son?" Lyle asked, as soon as they landed on their feet. Petunia was Lily's sister, so I hope she told him about being a wizard, Hogwarts, and maybe needing a wand one day, Rummus replied. Petunia didn't care for magic, but I hope she told her nephew the basics. Lyle put his hand on Rummus' shoulder. "We'll find out soon enough, won't we?" Rummus nodded, and the two knocked on the door of the nondescript row home where Harry had been living for the better part of the last year. The door opened and a stout, kind woman greeted them. "Hello, gentlemen. Are you the Misters Lupin?" "We are," Rummus replied. "Are you Mrs. Mason?" "I am." "Do you have your identification?" Rummus and Lyle pulled out their freshly obtained driver's licenses from their billfolds, presenting them to Mrs. Mason. She was pleased with the identification, and permitted them entry. The home was warm and pleasant enough. There were faint sounds of children's laughter from upstairs. Rummus felt the anticipation building of finally seeing Harry Potter for himself, if only to ensure the boy was happy and well. Mrs. Mason led them into a small dining room, where stacks of paperwork awaited them. "It's wonderful, what you two are doing," Mrs. Mason said cheerily. "Older children are so hard to place, especially those with behavioral problems." "Behavioral problems?" asked Lyle. "What kind of problems?" "We've had doctors try to figure it out, but Harry doesn't seem to fit into any of the usual psychopathological categories. Our best guess is schizophrenia, a serious condition that can be managed well enough for now." "Might I ask why he's been given this diagnosis?" Rummus said carefully. "Harry has unusual behavior," Mrs. Mason replied. "Delusions and hallucinations are common." She pulled out a file, and flipped through several pages until she reached the desired one. "He often discusses a flying motorbike, and a flash of green light," Mrs. Mason read. "A large giant, sometimes a woman's scream. Harry appears to have come from an unstable home, or he's a pathological liar, as he told us upon arrival that he used to sleep in a cupboard, and his Lou privileges were dependent upon his behavior." Lyle and Rummus were both aghast at what they were hearing. "Is that true, or is it the illness?" Lyle asked, looking somber. "We're unsure," Mrs. Mason said. "This is why his mental state has been so difficult to diagnose. He also says he can talk to snakes, and the snakes reply. That's not normal. Very clearly a delusion of grandeur." Rummus looked worriedly at Lyle. Either Harry was truly delusional, or he was a Parselmouth. Both seemed as likely as the other, given the rarity of Parselmouths. "He's still available for adoption," Mrs. Mason continued. "Other than his mental state, he can be a sweet, if timid boy. Sometimes strange things happen around him, but we think it's the schizophrenia manifesting itself. He's medicated for it. The medication dulls him slightly, but since taking it, his nightmares seem to have disappeared." Rummus gulped. "Can we see him?" "Of course," Mrs. Mason smiled. "He never gets visitors." "You say you knew his parents?" "I went to school with his mother and father," Rummus said. "In Scotland. We haven't any records of his parents' education. Harry's records indicate his father was unemployed and uneducated. His mother has no educational records to speak of." We went to an alternative school, Rumors said, uncomfortable. Sort of a cooperative. An experimental school, perhaps? Mrs. Mason asked uneasily. Something like that, Lyle interjected. My son and his friends all knew how to read, write, and do arithmetic. Mr. Lupin has a stable job, and that's all that matters to us, Mrs. Mason said. There is no level of education needed to love a child. Shall I get Harry? Please, Rumors said. I would really like to see him. Mrs. Mason stood and left the dining room, returning only moments later with a small, bespectacled boy with brilliant emerald eyes and messy, jet-black hair. Rumors' heart almost leapt out of his chest upon seeing Harry Potter for the first time in almost a decade. He was James Miniature, with Lily's eyes. Hi, Harry, Rumors said warmly. You look just like your dad. I do? Harry asked. His green eyes widened, and a small smile played at his lips. I don't have any pictures of my parents. I brought some, Rumors said. Would you like to see them? Harry nodded enthusiastically, but stood where he was, clearly wary of the two new strangers. Oh, I forgot to introduce myself, Rumors said hastily. I'm Remus Lupin, and this is my father, Lyle Lupin. I went to an alternative school with your mum and dad, Lily and James. I was at their wedding, too. Harry's eyes grew even wider than before, and they remained transfixed on Remus, as if he was an illusion or hallucination. Remus pulled out 5 photographs from his briefcase, having charmed them to stay still, in case the muggles came across them. Would you like me to explain the photographs, Harry, or would you like to see them first on your own? Can I see them, please? Harry asked, his gaze unwavering from Remus. It was slightly uncomfortable to be stared at so intently, but Remus figured that if the boy really did have mental health problems, he was coping to the best of his ability. Here you are, Harry, Remus said, offering the photographs to him. Harry snatched them and retreated back to his corner, engrossed in the images. Who are these people? Asked Harry, holding a picture of the 4 Marauders. Your dad's on the left. I'm on the other end. In between us are 2 of our old friends, Peter and Sirius. They're not around anymore, either, Remus said bitterly. It wasn't yet time to share the news of Peter's death and Sirius' betrayal, thought Remus. Did they die too? One of them did, and the other one isn't around. It doesn't matter, though. I'm here for you, if you'd like. You want me? I wanted to see how you were, Harry, Remus said kindly. I visited the neighborhood where your aunt and uncle lived and I learned you weren't there anymore. As your other guardian, didn't have you either, I looked for you, and here you are. Harry's stare was unnerving. His face was unreadable, a mixture of shock, awe, and incredulity. But you want me? If you'd like, then yes, Remus replied. You can come with me soon, if you'd like. I believe you can stay with us a little while to see how it goes, and maybe stay with us forever. Remus looked up to Mrs. Mason for confirmation, while Harry's jaw dropped. Yes, Harry, Mrs. Mason confirmed. The Mrs. Lupin filled out all the paperwork for you. You can live with them for a few months, and if you like it, I believe Mr. Remus could adopt you. You want to adopt me? Harry asked, his eyes shining now. You actually want me? You didn't make a mistake. Unless there's another Harry James Potter whose parents I went to school with. No, I didn't make a mistake, Remus said, smiling. I have no children, Harry, and no partner. It would be you, me, and my dad, if that's all right. Harry's hands were trembling as he held the photographs. You're sure? Only if you are, Remus said. If you're happy here, I wouldn't want to take you away. You can stay with me for a few months, and if you don't like it, you can come back. Right. Remus looked back up to Mrs. Mason for confirmation once more. Yes, Mrs. Mason said, with a smile. Mr. Remus can always bring you back if you don't like it. I want to go, Harry said suddenly. Can I please go with you, Mr. Remus? Call me Remus, Harry. You can call my dad Lyle for now, Lyle said, never taking his eyes off Harry. Remus couldn't read Lyle's expression, either, but he hadn't opposed any decision thus far, encouraging Remus to continue. We can arrange for Harry to go tomorrow, Mrs. Mason said, clearly delighted that Harry would be leaving them. How will he be getting to you? By car, Remus lied. We're staying nearby. We'll come back tomorrow for him. Is that still all right for you, Harry? Harry nodded enthusiastically, still clutching the photographs. You can keep those for the night, Remus said, eyeing the way Harry was holding on to them. I have more at home for you. Home, Harry said softly, a look of disbelief on his eyes. We live in Cardiff. Do you know where that is? Wales. Correct. It's almost time for the summer holidays, but in the fall you'll go to school there, if you still want to stay with us. I'm not having a delusion, am I, Mrs. Mason? Harry suddenly asked, turning to face the matronly woman. Is this Raoul? Remus' heart broke slightly upon hearing Harry's words. No, Harry. This is all Raoul. Mr. Remus has been waiting for you for several weeks. You have? Harry asked, looking from the photographs to Remus. I have. I wish I had known where you were earlier. I'm sorry, Harry. Harry continued trembling and looking around his body. Remus was unsure if the boy was experiencing a hallucination, per the matron's diagnosis, or if he was simply nervous. We'll come back tomorrow, Harry, Remus promised. We'll take you home. Home, Harry repeated, looking at the photographs. Home. Till tomorrow? Remus asked, looking back up to Mrs. Mason. We'll see you at 9 o'clock, Mrs. Mason said brightly. Isn't that wonderful, Harry? Harry's eyes welled with tears, and he wiped them away with a long, ragged sleeve. He nodded, and then slipped out of the dining room, photographs still in hand. As I said, he's a sweet boy. A little inattentive, if you saw, but that'll be his condition. You'll be required to take him to the psychiatrist every few months. I'll include all of his medical records in his file tomorrow, Mrs. Mason said. The Children's Services Officer requires monthly check-ins. Although you're in Cardiff, you'll have to come back to Kent every month with Harry for the first 6 months. If all goes well, then it will be every other month until his adoption is complete, assuming you, your father, and Harry himself agree to the adoption. With the last-minute information, and Remus' head spinning from the reality of seeing Harry, he and Lyle left the children's home in high spirits. Is that all you have, Harry? Asked Remus, looking down at the battered rucksack as they walked out of the children's home. This is everything I own, Harry said glumly. Even my clothes weren't mine. They were Dudley's. We'll get you more clothes, Lyle said firmly. Once we settle in, we'll get you what you need. You're going to get me clothes? My own? Asked Harry, his green eyes shining further with incredulity and excitement. Of course, Harry. Some of them will be second-hand, I'm afraid, but you can choose them yourself. We'll find you some new clothes and some second-hand clothes, but they'll all be yours, Remus said. We have some books for you, too, he added. Now that I work at a bookshop, I have a good discount and can always get you more. I can get my own books, too. You didn't have very much of your own at the children's home, did you, Harry? Lyle asked, a pained look in his eyes. I've never had anything of my own, Harry said forcefully. It was all Dudley's before it was mine. I got his broken or old stuff. Remus' heart broke once more. Although the Lupins had never been well off after receiving the bite that made him a werewolf, he always had his own clothes, books, and toys, even if they were sometimes second-hand. Remus promised himself that Harry would have his own things as soon as they could afford them. When we're home, we'll put away what you have and do a little shopping, Remus offered. Would you like that? Remus was worried Harry's eyes would never go back to a normal size, as the boy nodded furiously without saying a word. He was in constant shock or awe at whatever Remus and Lyle suggested. Remus began wondering what the boy had been exposed to either with the Dursleys or the children's home that made him so hesitant. They finally walked towards a small alley, from which they would take the portkey back to Cardiff. We haven't said anything about magic, Lyle said, as if reading Remus' mind. Magic? Harry asked. Are you magicians? Remus blinked, startled. Harry, did your Aunt Petunia tell you anything about your parents, and what they did? They died in a car crash. Dad was a drunk and unemployed, Harry said miserably. Mum wasn't much better. Sweet Merlin, no, Harry, Remus said, forcing himself to stay calm. Did she tell you that they could do magic? They were drunk magicians, asked Harry, scratching his messy hair in confusion. "This is worse than I thought," Lyle muttered. "Stun him and take him with us. We'll explain when we're home." "Stun me?" Harry asked, horror-struck, as he began turning on his heel. "Stupefy," Remus said quietly, as Lyle cast a cushioning charm on the ground. Harry fell over, unconscious, and Remus took the boy in his arms. "This is going to be harder than I thought," Remus said grimly. "Isn't it always?" Lyle replied. "But you were right to take the boy in, son. I can't tell you how good it is to hear you say that. Now, let's take the portkey before people think we're kidnapping him." Lyle nodded, and pulled out the rusty hammer. Moments later, the three were whisked off to Cardiff to begin their new life together. Harry was slowly waking on his bed. Remus sat in the chair in Harry's room, a photo album waiting on the desk, and his wand in hand. "Mrs. Mason?" Harry asked groggily. "No, Harry, it's me, Remus. Remember? You're home now with us in Cardiff." "Home," Harry said, smiling to himself. "It's real. It is indeed. I believe we have some things to discuss." "What did I do?" Harry asked, panicked. "Am I in trouble?" "No, no, no. You're not in trouble. I realized you know nothing about your parents, and I want to discuss them with you." "My parents? You said earlier, before we left, that your Aunt Petunia told you that they were drunkards and unemployed." "That is very wrong." "It is." Harry brightened, and began sitting up on the bed. "Your father, James, was a wizard. Your mother, Lily, was a witch." "That makes you a wizard," Harry, Remus said carefully. "Do you know what that means?" "Like Merlin." "I can do magic." "Yes, just like Merlin. You can do magic." "So can I, and so can my dad," Lyle, Remus said, grinning. "Do you see this?" Remus held up his wand, and Harry nodded. "This is my wand. This is how I can do most of my magic." "Wingardium Leviosa," Remus said, pointing his wand at the photo album. The album levitated a few feet in the air, and Harry's face grew from curious to delighted instantly. "Can I try?" asked Harry. "Not yet. You'll need your own wand to do magic. Witches and wizards get their wands when they turn 11. Your parents and I all went to a special school called Hogwarts. It's a school of magic." Remus flicked his wand at the bookcase, and summoned an old copy of the Standard Book of Spells, Grade 1. "I have some of my old school books here. You're welcome to read through them. You'll get your own copies when you start at Hogwarts next year." "This is real." "Very much so. You're a wizard, Harry. I can't believe your aunt and uncle never told you any of this." "Uncle Vernon hated magic. Magic shows, magicians, everything with magic he hated." Harry wrung his hands anxiously, and flipped through the spellbook. "Remus, am I crazy? Am I real? Are you real?" Remus furrowed his brow and frowned. "Why would you ask that?" "Mrs. Mason and the doctors said I had problems in my head, and sometimes I make things up." "You might have some problems," Remus admitted. "But I don't think that Mrs. Mason and the doctors were always right. I'm beginning to think that you had accidental magic sometimes, and they didn't know how to explain it." "Accidental magic?" Remus smiled. "Did anything funny or unusual happen to you when you were scared or angry, Harry?" "One time I turned a teacher's wig blue," Harry said quickly. "Another time I got stuck in a tree when Aunt Marge's dog Ripper went after me, but I was really high and couldn't get out. I broke windows sometimes." "Magic," Remus said softly. "Sometimes, before a wizard or witch learns to control their magic, they will have bursts of accidental magic like that. When I was a little boy, my mum wouldn't let me have an extra biscuit, and I lit the dresser on fire. Well, my mum was a muggle. That's what we call non-magic people. My dad is a wizard," Remus continued. "I'm a wizard too, and I went to school to be better at learning spells and magic. Your parents went there, and so will you." Harry sat in stunned silence for several moments. "I'm not crazy. If being a wizard makes you crazy, then all of us are." Remus reached out his hand to pat Harry on the shoulder, but he flinched and backed away instinctively, worrying Remus. "I'm sorry about that, Harry." I wanted to pat your shoulder. Next time I'll let you know what I'm doing, okay? Harry nodded, clutching the spellbook against his thin chest, and drew a blanket around himself. Are you hungry? It's almost time for lunch. I can make you something. Harry shook his head. You're sure? Remus frowned. He was certain Harry would be hungry after the eventful morning. I'll make cheese toasties and tomato soup. If you're hungry, come to the kitchen, and then I can give you a tour of the house. This is your room, by the way. I know it's a bit small and simple, but we can add to it as you like. I have my own room. Harry squeaked. This is my room. Of course you have your own room. Mine is across the hall, and my dad's is on the other side of this room. The loo is on the other side of my room. This is my own room. Harry repeated. I don't have to share. No, Harry. This is your very own room. That's your bed, desk, and I'm sitting in your chair. The bookcase is yours, as are all the books in it. You can spend time in here whenever you'd like, but you'll have to go to school when the term begins. Harry's eyes remained wide as he took in every nook and cranny of the small bedroom. It wasn't grand, by any means, thought Remus, but Harry looked as if he'd won a prize by having the small room to himself. Well, I'll be in the kitchen fixing lunch, Remus said. If you get hungry, please come. If there's something else you'd like, let me know. When will you need me for dishes? Remus furrowed his brow again. Dishes? You need me for washing dishes? Or cleaning? No, Harry. You might have some chores later on, but for right now, let me take care of you. You're mine now. I want to take care of you. You mean that? You really want me? I'm yours. Only if you want to be, Remus said quietly. If you like it here, you can stay. I can't promise it will always be easy or fun, but I want to take care of you, Harry. Harry was trembling again under his blanket, and Remus resisted the urge to hug the boy. Harry needed time to adjust, and Remus was determined to help him. The offer for lunch stands. If you're hungry, you're welcome to join me and my dad. Remus smiled at Harry once more and left his room. One tough conversation down, too many more to go, thought Remus. Notes. Next chapter to be posted on Friday, the 18th of February, 2022. Chapter 3, Home. Chapter text. 2 weeks had passed since Harry Potter had come to live with the Lupins. Those 2 weeks had been the most wonderful and terrifying weeks of his young life. Harry swung between elation that he'd finally been chosen and wanted by real wizards, and terror that he would disappoint the Lupins, only to be brought back to the children's home. He remembered their faces that day at Mrs. Mason's. Both looked a little nervous, especially Remus. Harry was at first worried about Remus' appearance, worn, lined, scarred, and in shabby clothing. But Mrs. Mason had assured Harry that the Lupins were competent guardians and had gone through the process just for him. For Harry. Naturally, Harry tried to stay out of everyone's way, to show he deserved to be there, and was worth whatever expense the Lupins incurred to keep him. He was painfully reminded of Uncle Vernon every time the Lupins spent anything on him. He fretted that any day now, the Lupins would decide Harry wasn't worth it and they would return him to the children's home. To his surprise, Remus and Lyle didn't want him to stay out of the way. Nor did they mind spending money on him. They hadn't bought him anything especially nice or new, but they didn't grumble at the till when they made their purchases. They even wanted to spend time with him and talk to him. They wanted to be with him. It was all very bizarre. That Tuesday morning started off like many of the previous mornings. He woke, made his bed neatly so as not to disappoint his caregivers, and padded quietly towards the kitchen in case he made too much noise. He could still recall Uncle Vernon screaming at him for making too much noise. "Harry, good morning," Remus said brightly. "How are you?" "Good. Would you like toast and bacon again today, or something else?" Harry often wondered what other breakfast foods might be available at the Lupins, but always kept his requests simple. He couldn't go back to the children's home now, not after all the real magic he'd seen. "Toast and bacon, please." "You know you can have other things," Harry, Remus said. "I'm not the best cook or baker, but I could try for you." Harry was silent for several moments. He didn't dare ask for anything else. What if he suggested something that made Remus angry? I'll tell you what. I made Welsh cakes this morning and they're delicious with tea. Would you like to try one? Remus held out a plate with cinnamon-dusted cakes, and Harry gingerly took one from the plate, taking a small bite from it. The cake was gone in an instant, leaving Harry hungry for more. You liked it, eh? You eat a little too quickly. Your face is covered in cinnamon, Remus said, offering both a smile and a napkin to Harry. I'm sorry I eat fast, Harry apologized, feeling the agonizing sense of dread that he would be kicked out of the Lupin's home. No, don't apologize. I can imagine you had to eat quickly with your previous guardians. With Dudley, if I didn't eat fast enough I wouldn't get enough to eat, Harry said softly. Mrs. Mason's was a little better. Aunt March's was the worst. I don't want you to feel you need to eat fast here. It's just me and my dad, and I promise we won't take your food. You'll always have enough to eat. Harry nodded, and sat in the dining chair, squirming. At the Dursleys, he would help with the dishes or cooking, and at the children's homes, he was often hiding from the other children, who often picked on him for being so strange. It wasn't as if he ever meant to break windows from the other side of the room, or light an armchair on fire, or turned a teddy bear into a real toad. These things just happened to him. Luckily, Remus and Lyle had explained that these were acts of accidental magic and they were perfectly normal for young wizards who didn't know how to control their magic yet. Harry had never been so relieved to hear that he wasn't a freak. He was a real wizard. Are you going to work today? Harry asked, seeing Remus gathering his things. No, actually. We're both going back to Kent. Harry froze. Back to Kent. They were returning him. What had he done? The sound of shattering glass startled both Harry and Remus. With a quick flick of his wand, and a spell that sounded like Reparo, the window was fixed in an instant. Harry was trembling in his chair, awaiting for the punishment or yelling he would inevitably receive, too scared to marvel at the way the window was repaired so quickly. Harry, are you okay? Asked Remus, kneeling down in front of him. Remus reached out a hand, but Harry flinched again. Can you tell me what's wrong? I promise I'm not upset, Harry. I'd like to know what went wrong to make you scared or angry. You're taking me back, Harry whispered. You're not keeping me. Oh, no, Harry. Not at all. I phrased that so poorly. Remus sat back, looking steadily at Harry. We have to go to the Muggle doctor. I'm going to talk to him about taking you off of the pills they make you take, because I don't think you need them. Besides, you're a wizard. I doubt those pills are doing anything to you. If you needed medication, you'd take potions. Harry looked up, relieved. I don't need them. I'm not a doctor or healer, but I think you're a perfectly normal wizard and everything you've experienced is more of you being scared or angry. Remember. That's what happens with accidental magic. Are you going to keep me? Of course I am, Remus smiled. As long as Children's Services allows me, I want you here with me. To do that, I have to take you to the doctor. You promise you'll keep me? I promise I'll do everything I can to keep you, Harry. Okay. Good. We'll be taking a portkey there, which is a special kind of travel for wizards. It might make you a little dizzy, but it's safe and fast. Harry perked up upon hearing that they would be traveling like real wizards that day. Remus and Lyle had taken him walking to the nearby village for all of their things, but they hadn't traveled anywhere far yet. Make sure you wash your hands, and we'll be going. Harry got out of his chair, and looked down the hall towards the other Mr. Lupin. Is Lyle staying here? Remus looked surprised. Do you want him to come with us? I don't want him to feel lonely, Harry confessed. Though Lyle was a little grumpy, he always checked on Harry at night after Remus did. That's considerate of you, Remus grinned. Why don't you ask him? Harry nodded, and went down the hall to find Lyle's room. He knocked on the door, and heard Lyle's gruff come in. Harry, I wasn't expecting you, Lyle said. Is something wrong? Remus is taking me to the doctor and I didn't want you to be lonely. Do you want to come with us? Harry felt a little nervous, but Lyle put him at ease immediately with his crooked smile. No, son, Harry's heart skipped a beat upon being called son by the grandfather figure. "I'm staying here to wait for you both. Be good for Remus and your healer." "I will," Harry vowed. "I will be good. I will be worthy. I will be wanted." The words, like a mantra, swept through Harry's mind. "Go on, son. I'll be waiting for you." Harry felt the inexplicable, unexpected urge to wrap his arms around Lyle, but felt unsure if the older wizard would like the affection. He kept his arms limply at his side, and decided to give Lyle a quick smile before coming back out to see Remus. "Ready, Harry? Is my dad staying here?" "He is. He called me son," Harry said softly. Remus looked surprised, and then concerned. "Is that all right with you? Being called son? It was nice. Like I belong. Like he wants me." Remus' face was unreadable, and his arms twitched at his side. He let his arms fall to his sides, motionless, as Harry had done before, and flashed Harry a tight smile. "Why don't we go? I'll show you what a portkey is, and once we're done at the Muggle doctor, we can get you more clothes." Harry was gobsmacked at the thought of getting more clothes. He had enough trousers and shirts for every day of the week now. They weren't especially nice or fancy, but they fit him perfectly. He didn't need to tie anything off or make new holes in a belt. To make it even better, Remus and Lyle had promised that the clothes were now his. "I can get more?" Harry asked, awed. "Of course. We'll be going to second-hand shops, if you don't mind," Remus said lightly. "I know it's not as nice as brand new clothes, but it will do for now." Remus looked at Harry expectantly, as if seeking his approval. That's good. He really didn't mind second-hand clothing. It's all he'd been used to for years and was simply glad to have more clothes that fit properly and that were of his own choosing. "Good," Remus exhaled in relief. "Let's go." Remus led Harry out to the back garden, where a rusty watering can awaited them. Harry saw Remus check his battered watch, and take the watering can off the wobbly iron table. "This is a portkey," Remus said, pointing to the watering can. "In a few minutes, it will glow and take us, spinning, and we'll land in Kent. It might make you a bit dizzy, but it will be quick." Harry was fascinated by the seemingly normal watering can. "This is real magic. As real as it gets." Remus smiled kindly at Harry and nodded. "Why don't you put a hand on the handle of the can?" He paused momentarily, and looked curiously at Harry. "Do you mind terribly if I hold your shoulder? I want to make sure you come along with me." Harry nodded nervously, and Remus gently took Harry's shoulder in his large, scarred hand. Harry then held the handle of the watering can as it started glowing. He almost jerked his hand back in wonder at seeing it glow, and then it felt as if a fishhook had stabbed his navel, taking him with it. They spun higher and higher until they were slowing down. Harry was suddenly grateful for Remus' firm, comforting hand on his shoulder. He felt as if he were going to fall face first into the ground, until Remus was riding him upwards. "What did you think?" asked Remus, once Harry was steady on his feet. "It felt funny, but that's okay," Harry said nervously. He hadn't really liked the portkey, but he was still too afraid to say what he felt, in case that was the only kind of real wizard transportation. If he was going to be a real wizard like Lyle and Remus, he would have to get used to his new reality. "You know, Harry, it's okay to say if you don't like something. Portkeys aren't my favorite, but they are fast and easiest when traveling far distances, or with underage wizards. We can try apparating on the way back, but that might be more uncomfortable for you at first." "Is it better or worse than the portkey?" "It's different," Remus said simply. "It's even easier once you're of age, and you get used to it. I can side-along apparate you on the way back, if you'd like." Harry was unsure, and scratched his messy hair. Remus bent down to meet Harry's eyes, wincing as he did so. "Why don't we go to the doctor first, then shop, and once we've done all that, you can see how you feel?" Harry nodded, and Remus led him towards the familiar doctor's office, a sparsely decorated space with abstract art and vinyl armchairs that Harry had never truly felt comfortable in. Remus sat Harry down on a worn vinyl bench, and went towards the tall, bony receptionist that reminded Harry a little too much of his Aunt Petunia. A few words were exchanged, and Remus sat back next to Harry. Within a few minutes, a nurse called Potter and Harry led Remus to the door, where he met with the psychiatrist. "Ah, Harry," Dr. Banks greeted. Come in, come in." Dr. Banks glanced behind Harry and frowned, before looking through the paperwork. "You must be Harry's new guardian, Mr. Lupin." "Yes, Harry's been in my care for the last 2 weeks," Remus replied. "Am I allowed to stay for this meeting, or should I be leaving?" "Don't go, please," Harry said, trying not to sound too pleading. It wasn't as if he disliked Dr. Banks, but Remus had come to be a comforting presence, like a real parent. "Mr. Lupin can stay with us for most of the appointment, but I'll ask him to excuse himself for just a few moments later on," Dr. Banks said, looking between Harry and Remus. Harry looked back up at Remus, who was smiling softly, and sat next to Harry in one of the worn vinyl armchairs in the stuffy little office. The first several minutes of the appointment, the doctor went over the usual questions on Harry's habits: eating, sleeping, mood, behavior, all of which were dull and normal. When it came time for questions on his delusions or hallucinations, Remus stepped in. "I haven't noticed anything unusual," Remus said carefully. "Harry appears to be a typical boy for his age, I think, although I haven't spent much time around children. My father and I haven't seen anything out of the ordinary." Dr. Banks frowned, and rifled through the massive stack of paperwork. Harry shifted uneasily on his seat, sweat gathering under his legs under the heat of the office. It became painful to unstick his legs from the vinyl, and he sat, fidgeting. "Harry, do you mind if I speak to your guardian, Mr. Lupin, for a few moments?" "It won't be long. You can wait out in the waiting room." Harry's eyes darted between the doctor and Remus. What if the doctor was going to tell Remus he was a terrible boy and shouldn't be kept? What if the doctor told Remus he was all wrong about Harry? "Don't worry, Harry," Remus said kindly. "I'm sure it won't be but a few minutes." Dr. Banks nodded and Harry unstuck himself from the heavy plastic of the seat, shuffling towards the door with a sense of dread. He went back out to the waiting room, where he found a seat next to a fake potted plant. An older woman was muttering to herself from the other side of the room and rocking back and forth. Harry chose to ignore her, lost in his thoughts. He considered for a moment how delicate his current situation was. He had longed for years for someone to come rescue him from his previous situations. He finally had that someone who knew his parents, no less, and everything felt as if it were going to be snatched from him at any minute. It was always how happiness had been. Elusive. "Harry." He looked up to see the nurse again, beckoning him towards the office. His footsteps felt heavy as he wondered what Dr. Banks and Remus had discussed in his absence. Remus was waiting for him just outside the doctor's office. "Dr. Banks would like to speak with you alone, Harry, but I'll be right out here if you need me," Remus said. Harry nodded and went into the office, closing the door behind him. "Harry, it's good to see you," Dr. Banks said briskly. "Please sit." Harry did as he was told and took the seat Remus had just occupied. "Your guardian, Mr. Lupin, tells me your delusions and hallucinations have been improving under his care. Is that so?" "Yes." Harry was unsure of what to say. The Lupins had told him that magic was supposed to be a secret. Dr. Banks and the others were called muggles because they couldn't do magic. Now that Harry knew his delusions were really bursts of accidental magic, he was unsure of how to reply honestly to the doctor. "Tell me a little more about living with the Mrs. Lupin, Harry. How do you like it? They treat you well?" Harry brightened instantly. "Remus and Lyle are the best. I have my room and my clothes. I have all the books I want and they take me to the village with them. Remus made Welsh cakes this morning for me and we took a magic watering can that spun us in the air to get here." He realized his mistake just a moment too late. Dr. Banks had been smiling and nodding along as Harry recited all the wonderful things that had happened to him since arriving at the Lupins, and the portkey. "The magic portkey. It sounds as if you're enjoying yourself, Harry," Dr. Banks said, through a tight smile. "There is no such thing as a magic watering can." Harry sat back, suddenly feeling anxious. What would Remus or Lyle do to him if they learned about revealing magic? Would they take him away? Would they return him? "It's all right, Harry. Mr. Lupin thought your delusions and hallucinations had gone away, but they haven't. I'll be writing you another prescription." Can you get Mr. Lupin for me? Harry nodded weakly and opened the door. Remus was smiling at him, and all Harry felt was disappointment in himself for letting Remus and Lyle down. He had exposed the world of magic to Dr. Banks, and he was terrified of what magical punishments would look like. "Ah, Mr. Lupin, it appears that Harry's delusions aren't gone," Dr. Banks said coolly. "It is no matter. You must not be experienced with special needs children. Harry was just telling me of a magic watering can that be spun you both in the air to get here. I assume that isn't true." Remus' jaw clenched, and he nodded curtly. "I assumed so," Dr. Banks continued, scribbling on several small sheets of paper. A short stack was handed to Remus. "You know where to take these?" "I do. Is there anything else I should know, Doctor?" "Be back in 8 weeks, and we'll take it from there." "Thank you, Doctor." "Harry, can you say thank you as well?" Remus asked gently. "Thank you, Dr. Banks," Harry said tonelessly. He watched as Remus took the thick stack of prescription paper and stuffed it in his pocket. "Let's go, Harry. We're going to shop for clothes now, remember." Harry blinked, wondering what Remus had planned now that he had exposed the secret of magic to Dr. Banks. Remus was as kind and steady as ever, and led Harry out of the doctor's office, back to the small alley they had arrived in from the portkey. Remus lifted his hand to his pocket and Harry flinched, waiting for whatever would come. "Harry. Are you all right?" He stood, trembling, wondering if he could run away fast enough from a wizard. "I'm not upset with you, Harry." Remus winced as he knelt in front of Harry. "I know you didn't mean to mention the portkey. I was listening to the entire time." "You were? How?" Remus grinned. "Magic, of course. I'm not at all upset with you. These things happen. We're going to keep going as we did before. We'll stop by the drugstore to get these prescriptions filled, however that works, and we'll get you clothes. What do you say?" You're not mad. You're not, you won't punish me." "Merlin, no, why would I do that?" "Is that why you flinched, Harry?" Harry nodded, feeling guilty and embarrassed at his behavior. He should have known that Remus was different from the others. Remus and Lyle, they seemed to care for him. "When you're ready, I would like for you to tell me about your life before you came to live with me and my dad. I want you to feel you can be honest with me, okay?" "Okay." Remus smiled again and stood, leading Harry back out to the street, to finish their day of errands and shopping. It was late one evening when Harry was sitting in his bed at the Lupins', nose in a new book. Several days had passed since their day at the doctor's, and since then, Harry had doubled his wardrobe and made his bedroom his own. Remus had helped him choose a paint color, a new bedspread, and choose more books for his bookshelf. Although the clothes were second-hand, the bedspread and books were new, and they were just for Harry. He was reading James and the Giant Peach, finding a kindred spirit in the orphan James. A low rumble interrupted Harry's focus. It was usually quiet by the night, and he pondered what might have disrupted the peaceful silence Harry had so come to treasure after a year in noisy, chaotic children's homes. He dog-eared a page in his book, set it down, and made his way out of his room, surprised to hear Lyle and Remus arguing. Curious, Harry crept towards the source of the arguing, hoping they weren't arguing about him. Some of his previous foster parents had argued about him, and it wasn't long after these arguments that he was moved to a new home. "I have to tell him," Dad, Remus said hotly. Harry almost gasped. He never heard Remus angry or raise his voice. "No, you don't. Your condition is managed well enough. I'll manage with him for the night. He's going to notice when I'm torn up in the morning and completely useless for 2 days. He knows you have an illness." "If he doesn't, I'll tell him," Lyle retorted. "There's no need for him to know. I'm raising him. He has a right to know." "Like hell, you're raising him. If it wasn't for me, you wouldn't have had a chance with the boy," Lyle shouted, scaring Harry further. Something like an angry snarl came from the room, raising the hairs on the back of Harry's head. "Don't you be that way with me, Remus. You knew what you were getting into when you dragged yourself into this crusade of yours. He was being abused. How could I leave him there? He wasn't your problem. I feel for the boy, I do, but you're in over your head. Lyle's tone and words were painful for Harry to hear. He thought Lyle had wanted him to. What if Lyle convinced Remus to take Harry away? I'm doing fine, Remus growled. We have enough to get by, and Harry's happy. Don't take this away from us. If you don't want me to take this away, then keep your mouth shut and get in the cellar. He can be told another time when he can understand. Do as I say, boy, Lyle barked. Something in Harry snapped, and before he knew it, his vision went black. Harry's eyelids felt heavy. He forced them open, finding himself in his bed. The soft light from the full moon illuminated the space. He gasped when he saw a figure sitting in his desk chair. Lyle. You took a tumble, son, Lyle said, his voice as hoarse as Remus had been earlier that day. How do you feel? Harry trembled slightly, reminded of the way Lyle had barked "do as I say, boy" in a tone identical to the way Uncle Vernon would yell at him before. You must have been very scared earlier, Harry, Lyle said softly. I apologize. I believe that was my doing. Harry's eyes grew wide. Adults never apologized. Only Remus had apologized to Harry, and Remus was special. Different. It would seem my son was right again, and if you'll allow me, I have something I'd like to explain to you. Lyle sounded knackered, looking older than his years, just like Remus. Is that all right, Harry? If not, I can wait until the morning. Harry said nothing, instead of nodding anxiously and putting his glasses back on to see. He clutched his old baby blanket against his chest. Remus had washed it for him, and although he was embarrassed about being an almost 10-year-old with a security blanket as his previous foster siblings had called it, Remus had only smiled and said it was wonderful he had something from his parents' home. Good. If you get tired or scared, let me know. This is hard to say, but I think you need to know. Harry's mind raced with the possibilities. Was this his last night at the Lupins? You know that Remus has an illness, right? Lyle began, and Harry nodded again. The illness he has is not a Muggle one. It's a magical illness, and it is a curse. Lyle inhaled sharply and produced a book from the top of the desk. Harry, do you know what a werewolf is? Someone who turns into a wolf at the moon. Yes, Lyle said, almost sighing in relief. A werewolf is a witch or wizard who has been bitten by another werewolf at the full moon. It is a curse. It means that the witch or wizard has to turn into a werewolf at the full moon. It is a painful process, and there is no cure. Harry stared, wondering where Lyle was going with the conversation. My son, Remus, is a werewolf, Lyle said softly. Tonight is the full moon. Is Remus okay? Harry said quickly. Is he hurt? Not yet. Lyle was especially forlorn upon saying this. Werewolves are not meant to be alone. When a werewolf is transformed, like Remus is right now, they want to bite and hurt people. Sometimes, this means they can kill people. Harry's jaw dropped. He looked up at the moon and thought back to kind, gentle Remus. Remus, who had never laid a hand on Harry. Remus, who only ever had smiles, books, and biscuits for Harry. My son is a good man, but he has a terrible affliction. Once a month, when the moon is full, he turns into a monster. He would not recognize you or me, and he would want to hurt or kill us. Harry's mouth was still open, in utter disbelief. Werewolves like my son do not want to hurt other people. They lock themselves up in a cage all night, but that doesn't mean they want to stop attacking someone. When they cannot attack others, they hurt themselves. You asked if Remus is hurt. He is probably hurting himself right now because he cannot find others to hurt. We should help him, Harry said instantly. We have to. Harry, you're a kind boy, but we can't do anything for him. It would be dangerous for us, and imagine how Remus would feel if he hurt me or you. He would never forgive himself. But, Harry, there's nothing we can do. Remus has been a werewolf since he was a little boy, younger than you. He had a wonderful opportunity to go to Hogwarts, and your father and his friends helped give him a normal life for 7 years. He will never be a normal wizard. Harry chewed on his lower lip, deep in thought. Is this why you didn't want me? Lyle sighed heavily again. I was worried for you. There's no way for me to tell you how risky it was for Remus to try to get you. If he were any other wizard, it would have been easier. As it is, we are risking a lot for both of us for you to be here, Harry. If other wizards knew a werewolf tried to get custody of a child who wasn't his, it would be almost impossible for you to stay. It's why Remus asked for my help from the beginning. I should go. I don't want you and Remus to get in trouble, Harry said, voice quivering. He couldn't be worth the effort they were going through. I don't tell you this to make you feel bad, Harry. We want you here. We are doing everything we can to make sure you never go back to the children's homes. We have to be careful because no one can know that Remus is a werewolf. Some people already do, especially those in the wizarding world. This is why Remus works for a bookshop. He is a talented, brilliant wizard, but because he is a werewolf, no one will hire him or even listen to him. I thought all wizards were nice as you and Remus, Harry said absent-mindedly. After his experiences with Muggles, Harry was all too eager to leave the Muggle world behind and be a real wizard, like Remus and Lyle. Wizards and Muggles have a lot in common, Lyle said gently. They are scared of what they don't know, or what looks frightening. Werewolves are frightening, and they should be. If Remus was here as a werewolf, we wouldn't survive the night. Where is he? Harry whispered. He'll come back, won't he? Remus is in our cellar. There is a strong cage in there, and that is where he will spend the night. In the morning, when the moon sets, I will come down and heal him. He will spend a couple of days in bed while he heals and then he can go back to work. Harry pushed his glasses back up his nose. Can I help? Lyle looked at Harry with an almost pitying gaze. You can't help with the healing, but you may be able to keep Remus company while he rests. That's all I can allow, son. Are you sure he will be okay? No, but he's survived this long. I've got a book here for you if you'd like. It's not perfect, but it might help you understand more about Remus. Lyle stood, wearier than ever. I know this is a lot, Harry. If, after you see Remus, you change your mind, you can go back to the children's home. No, Harry said firmly. I don't care. Remus is, I want to be here. He had resisted the urge to call Remus mine. After the last several years of his life, he had so desperately wanted a parent, and he finally had one to call his own. He didn't want another one taken away, especially one who actually seemed to care for him. That's good of you, Harry. You're a good boy. Harry's heart soared. He was a good boy, at last. For years and years, he had only ever been called bad. But here, he was a good boy. A muffled groan woke Harry the next morning. He hadn't remembered falling asleep, but someone Lyle, he recalled, must have taken his glasses off and placed them on his nightstand. He put them on and dressed quickly, hoping that Remus was back from the cellar. He needed to let Remus know right away that he didn't care he was a werewolf. He needed to let Remus know he wanted to stay with him, no matter what. Harry walked out his bedroom door to see Lyle removing a bloody cloak off his body. Blood-stained footsteps marked a path from the garden door to Lyle's bedroom, making Harry gasp loudly. Remus. Harry rushed down the corridor to where Remus' room was, seeing that the door was slightly ajar. He peeked through, finding Remus on the bed, pale and wrapped in various bandages. A pile of blood-soaked rags lay in a heap on the floor. Harry poked his nose through the door, opening it further. Lyle still appeared to be in his bedroom, so Harry snuck into Remus' room, approaching him carefully. He was asleep, the rise of his chest slow and steady. He was shirtless, covered in a web of silvery scars, intermingled with angry, red, freshly healing puncture wounds, lacerations, and scratches. Even Remus' face had been ripped open, but it was healing under a thick layer of paste. Harry reached out, wanting to hold Remus' hand, even if he couldn't feel it yet. He simply wanted to let Remus know he was there, waiting for him. The sound of a throat clearing surprised Harry. Lyle was in clean clothes again, watching Harry intently. I didn't want him to be alone, Harry said lamely. He won't wake up for a long while. I gave him a potion for that. It helps with healing, Lyle said. Harry looked back at Remus, still concerned at his guardian's bloodied, battered frame. Come, Harry. Let's get you something to eat. While you eat, I'll clean up in here, and you can come back and sit with Remus. Harry nodded and went to the kitchen. If nothing else, he would read with Remus until he woke. It was the least he could do for the man who was risking so much to keep him. There was once a boy named Milo who didn't know what to do with himself, not just sometimes, but always. When he was in school he longed to be out, and when he was out he longed to be in. On the way he thought about coming home, and coming home he thought about going. The phantom Tolbooth, Remus rasped, half smiling at Harry, though he was clearly in pain. It was one of my favorites as a boy. I've never read it, Harry said. I thought you might like to hear stories. You remind me so much of your father sometimes, Remus croaked, still half smiling. He would be so proud of you, you know. Harry's heart swelled. He had been at the Lupins for almost a month, and the longer he spent with Remus and Lyle, the more he hoped he could stay forever. Would you like to hear the rest of the story? Asked Harry, pushing his glasses back up the bridge of his nose. Or are you too tired? Keep reading, Harry. Hearing you read it makes me happy, Remus said hoarsely. I'll sleep later. Pleased with himself for making Remus happy, Harry reopened the book and began to read aloud. Chapter 4, Fury. Chapter text. Do you think I should ask him about this? Said Remus, flipping through Harry's records once more. At the psychiatrist's, he'd surreptitiously duplicated Harry's paperwork, including a litany of delusions and hallucinations the boy had claimed in the last year, most of which were deeply disturbing. Lyle frowned as he looked over the records. What are the chances he's telling the truth, do you think? He has yet to lie to me, that I'm aware of. But I hope these are either lies or delusions, because if this is true, I'm glad the Dursleys are dead, Remus said darkly. And I'm going to do my damnedest to keep Harry, even if I need to obliviate or confound everyone in my way. Son, you're doing a fine job managing without magic on them. Keep it that way, or you might risk losing him. I know. Remus sighed. But reading his experiences at that woman's home, sleeping in a bloody doghouse, if anyone deserves a good cruck. Remus, Lyle said sharply. Control your temper. It doesn't do you or Harry any good to torture her, even if what she did was wrong. More than wrong, this is abuse. Remus pounded his fist on the kitchen table, making the tea slosh over the rim of their mugs. Calm down, or you'll wake him, Lyle said. He needs his sleep. He stayed up with you while you healed, not keeping his eyes off you. Let him rest. He did? Remus asked, in disbelief. He stayed the whole time. Wouldn't let you out of his sight. Lyle put his glasses down and rubbed the bridge of his nose with his fingers. He cares for you deeply already. Poor kid's been starved for affection for too long. I would bet these reports are true, based on his behavior. How am I supposed to ask him about this? Hey Harry, tell me about your horrific neglect and abuse. Ask him about his life before here, and be honest with him if he asks you questions, Lyle said, before taking a sip of his tea. It's easier for him to be honest if you're honest with him in return. Like how you were honest with me. Remus said, rolling his eyes. Forgetting to mention to me that it was Fenrir Greyback who bit me until I walked into a werewolf camp and almost died. How were we supposed to know you'd do that to yourself? Lyle snapped. We never wanted you to go looking for your attacker, and you found him anyway. And almost died, Remus added icily. His time at the werewolf encampments before the Potter's death had been some of the cruelest, loneliest years of his young life. It had all been in the name of winning werewolves away from Voldemort, but Remus had failed to win anyone over and instead had been accused of being a spy one too many times. You're not dead now, and that's what matters. Learn from my mistakes, son. Be honest with him, Lyle said, exhaling forcefully. The two sat in uneasy silence, sipping their tea in contemplation. I am proud of you, Lyle said quietly. For taking him on. You ought to know that. Remus looked up, startled at his father's admission. Without saying any more, Lyle stood and cleaned his mug, and left Remus in the kitchen alone, to decide how to ask Harry about his previous life. Harry's 10th birthday was fast approaching, and Remus had still not spoken with the boy about his life before arriving in Cardiff, or before the children's homes with the various Dursleys. Remus had a difficult time deciding when it was best to ask about Harry's likely past trauma, not wanting to disturb him. Harry was finally beginning to relax in the Lupin home, and had been bold enough to ask for specific foods for breakfast or dinner, which Remus had gladly provided. These little changes gave Remus hope that Harry was slowly healing from whatever he'd come from. Perhaps, Remus thought, after his birthday, he could ask Harry about his past. But first, he had to get Harry's preferences for a birthday cake, and what he'd like to do to celebrate. Remus strode towards Harry's room, which was now cheerfully decorated in crimson and gold. Since Harry had learned that his parents, Remus, and Lyle had all been Gryffindors, he had chosen to decorate his room in the same colors. Remus was only too happy to oblige to the request. He knocked softly on the door, finding Harry with his nose in a book, a favorite pastime of the boy. As soon as Harry saw Remus, he stood abruptly and closed the book, placing it on one side. "You need me?" asked Harry. "Just to chat with you, Harry. As usual, don't feel the need to stand when I come in. I'm not that important, I assure you." Harry relaxed slightly and sat back on his bed, while Remus took the desk chair. "Am I in trouble?" "Not at all." Remus smiled, trying to reassure Harry. "I was wondering, your 10th birthday is in a few days' time, and I was hoping to learn what you'd like to do for it, and what kind of cake you like best." Harry blinked several times at Remus, evidently at a loss for words. "We don't have to have cake, if you don't like it," added Remus. "I know you like treacle tart and Welsh cakes too. I wanted to make sure you had something special. You only turned 10 once, right?" Harry swirled his finger on the fabric of his quilt. Remus sat quietly, waiting for Harry to decide what he wanted. "I had a cake last year, but I didn't like it," Harry finally said. "Miss Eleanor made it. Michael and Nina told her I liked carrot cake, but I don't." He kept tracing a pattern in his quilt with his finger, not looking up at Remus. "I don't know what cake I like. I never had much cake before." Remus sat still, patient for Harry to continue. He was finally opening up about his past, and Remus was loath to prevent it, letting Harry set the pace. "Aunt Petunia sometimes made cake, but it was only for good boys. For her, or Uncle Vernon, or Dudley. Or their friends. I never got any, unless it was burnt." Remus bit back the bile that had come up at the back of his throat. He felt rage swelling up in his chest at the thought that Harry had been denied cake of all things, and been given burnt pieces instead. "I don't know if I even like cake," Harry said, his head still bent down. "I don't want to disappoint you if I don't like it." "Oh, Harry," Remus said softly. "You couldn't disappoint me over something like cake." Harry's head snapped up, now looking deep into Remus' eyes with his own emerald green ones. "How about this? I'll go to the bakery and get one of each cupcake they have, and you can try each flavor on your birthday. Then we'll know what you do and don't like. What do you say?" Harry's shy smile was all Remus needed to see to know it was a good idea, and Remus grinned in return. "Good. Now, what would you like to do on your birthday?" "I took the day off so we could spend it together, if you'd like," Remus said, feeling grateful that Harry had accepted the cupcake idea. "Or we can stay here. It's your day." Harry, once more, sat in quiet disbelief upon hearing Remus speak. It was a look he was becoming familiar with, a look that appeared whenever Harry was offered something he was surprised by. "Would you like ideas, Harry?" The boy nodded, and Remus continued. "We can go into London. They have museums and the zoo there. I'm afraid we still can't do much with the Wizarding World just yet, but there are lots of Muggle things to do in London. We could go to any of the national parks, and go walking or hiking. We could go to one of the coasts, by the sea. Or, we could stay here. Whatever you'd like to do." After a moment's hesitation, Harry spoke. "Which one is the cheapest?" Remus frowned. "I don't want you to worry about that. We've set some money aside for your birthday. While it's not as much as I'd like, it's plenty for us to enjoy a day out in London, or at the beach." "Can we go to the zoo?" Harry said, a hopeful edge to his voice. "Dudley got to go on a school trip but I didn't. Aunt Petunia said they couldn't afford for both of us to go, so I stayed home and cleaned." Remus, once more, set aside his temporary rage at Petunia Dursley to force a smile onto his face. "If that's what you want, Harry, we will spend the day at the zoo." "Really?" Harry was now smiling, looking eager. "You'll take me?" "Of course. It's your birthday, Harry." We'll go to the zoo and then try all the cupcakes I can get my hands on. I want you to enjoy your special day. Harry nodded slowly, his smile stuck on his face. Remus couldn't help but smile too, despite his anger at the Dursleys. He would address that another day. For now, he had a birthday to plan. Harry's birthday was an unmitigated success. Lyle, Remus, and Harry had spent the entirety of the day at the zoo. They spent almost an hour in the reptile room alone, as Harry curiously chatted with the snakes. Remus had cast a muffliato around them as they went from exhibit to ensure Muggles wouldn't overhear the strange hissing and rasping sounds from the boy's mouth, or the snakes' snouts. Remus and Lyle were both uneasy with the display of Parseltongue, but said nothing, as Harry was delighted that his ability to talk to snakes was not, in fact, a delusion. Remus had confirmed it, upon asking Harry to ask the snakes to move their heads left and right, or up and down. The snakes had all cooperated, and Harry had grinned from ear to ear as a result. The day at the zoo was followed by a buffet of 10 cupcakes to celebrate Harry's 10th birthday. It resulted that he liked almost all kinds of cake, unless they had vegetables or poppyseeds. The boy had never truly had cake before, at least not edible cake. Now that he knew what it was, he was looking forward to every birthday or holiday for more. Remus was tempted to make a cake daily to make up for Harry's lack of it in his childhood, but Lyle had talked him out of it. Days after Harry's birthday, Remus decided to talk to him. After his revelation just before his birthday that of having no proper birthdays or cake from the Dursleys, Remus wanted to learn more. Thus, that sunny August afternoon, he made a double chocolate cake and called Harry to see him in the kitchen. "Is it Lyle's birthday?" Harry asked, upon seeing the 2-layer cake on the table. "No, I just felt like making it," Remus said lightly. "I thought you would enjoy it. You made it for me." "I like chocolate too," Remus said wryly. "So it's for us. Would you like milk with it?" Harry nodded enthusiastically, and Remus cut a generous slice of cake for each of them, and 2 glasses of milk. After a few bites each of cake, Remus decided to ask the question that had been at the tip of his tongue for weeks. "Harry, what was it like for you before you were here?" Harry looked up, his mouth halfway filled with chocolate cake, and chewed it slowly before swallowing. "You mean, at Mrs. Mason's?" "Mrs. Mason's, the homes before then, and your relatives," Remus clarified. "I want to know everything about your life, if you're willing to share with me." Harry's eyes darted back and forth and he bit his lower lip. He blinked rapidly, and then scrunched his eyes together before speaking. "Am I going to the doctor again?" "No." "Am I going to get into trouble?" "No." "Are they going to get into trouble?" Remus hesitated before answering, and by now Harry had opened his eyes to meet Remus. "If they did something wrong, maybe. I don't know. You can tell me what you'd like me to do." Harry was pushing around crumbs on his plate, seemingly deep in thought. "I don't want to get in trouble." "Why would you get in trouble for telling the—" Remus stopped mid-sentence, realizing that the truth had led Harry to be given fistfuls of pills that weren't necessary. He cleared his throat. "Harry, I want you to know you can be honest with me. If you'd like, we can make a sort of game of it. If you tell me something about your life before you came here, I'll tell you something about my life before you were here. Can I ask anything?" Harry's eyes were still wide with concern. "Yes, and I'll answer as best as I can," Remus promised. "I'll go first. Before you came here, I didn't have a steady job because I was a werewolf. I tried finding jobs in the magical world but they never lasted very long. It wasn't until I tried looking for you that I worked harder to get a job that I could keep for longer." Harry was racked with attention. Remus sat still and placed his hands on the table, hoping Harry would speak. "Maybe you can tell me one of your earliest memories," Remus suggested. Harry bit his lip. I didn't like the Dursleys. I slept in the cupboard under the stairs." Remus closed his eyes and exhaled forcefully. "That doesn't seem very nice." "It was okay." Harry looked out into the distance. "At least I didn't have to share it like my rooms at the homes. It was my cupboard." Harry fell silent again, and Remus decided it was his turn to speak. "When I was your age, I didn't have any friends. My parents had to move around a lot because of my condition. I didn't make any real friends until I went to school and met your dad. Really. Really. Whenever we stayed in one spot for more than a few months, others would get suspicious of us, and we would have to go. When I started at school, I met your dad and a few other friends and it changed my life. Harry chewed on his bottom lip, and opened his mouth to speak again. Dudley always got new stuff. I got all his hand-me-downs and broken stuff. He was always bigger, so I never got clothes that fit. Now you do, Remus said gently. Your clothes fit and your things aren't broken. They might be a little worn, but they aren't broken. Remus made it a point to remind himself to buy something new and special for Harry soon, just to surprise the boy and give him something all his own. Without noticing the time, the afternoon flew by. Remus listened carefully as he and Harry exchanged stories from their past. Remus chose the more personal, embarrassing stories of his childhood and adolescence, while Harry shared the darker, more somber memories of his short life. The cupboard. The doghouse. The neglect. The hunger. Remus' blood was boiling by the time Harry finished his tales. It took all his effort to stay rooted to his seat, in order to prevent himself from apparating to torture Marge Dursley for her horrific abuse and neglect of Harry. Remus wanted nothing more than to wrap Harry in his arms and assure him that no further pain would come his way, but until he could be adopted, Remus was reluctant to promise anything. Harry was sniffling by the time he was done sharing his childhood with Remus, and he in turn was holding back the urge to take vengeance upon the people who had caused James and Lily's son to suffer so much. Harry. The boy looked up, eyes glistening with unshed tears. You're safe here. You will never sleep anywhere but your bed. You will always have enough to eat. You will always have clothes that fit. You will always have your own toys and books. I can't promise I'll have all the latest Muggle devices, but you will always have everything you need, so long as you live under this roof. Do you understand? Harry nodded weakly, still staring down at the table. Remus stood from his place and knelt before him. He reached out a hand, and placed it on Harry's knee. He looked up, surprised at the affection, as he nearly always was. I know I'm not your father, Harry, but I want you to know you'll always have me. It was then that Harry surprised Remus by wrapping his arms around Remus' chest, snuggling his head against the crook of Remus' neck. It was the first time Harry had shown physical affection in almost 2 months. It was the first time Harry had shown physical affection at all towards Remus or Lyle, and the feeling was so overwhelmingly good that Remus fought back tears that threatened to overtake him. Don't worry, Harry. I'll always take care of you, Remus murmured, holding Harry close to his chest. I'll always be here. They remained like that, Harry hugging Remus tightly, for a while. Remus' joints were aching and his knees were screaming in protest, but he ignored the physical discomfort. Harry was opening up to him, and trusting him. That feeling overcame any physical pain. Another doctor's visit had come and gone, as well as another inspection upon the Lupin home to ensure Harry was happy and well adjusted before enrolling in the local primary school for Year 6. They'd come home with several more unnecessary pills, which Remus vanished with magic. Harry was opening up, and his accidental magic was becoming more predictable as his fears were assuaged. It was now the beginning of September, which meant it was the first day of school for Harry. Having never been to a Muggle school before, both Remus and Lyle were visibly nervous on the first day, as they were unsure of what to expect. Lyle had wanted to homeschool Harry, but Remus knew that anything out of the ordinary would be frowned upon by children's services. Until Harry was legally his through adoption, Remus had to comply with all of children's services' demands, requests, or expectations. Thus, on that first day of school in September, Remus walked Harry to the local primary school. Harry was outfitted in the school's uniform, and Remus walked alongside him to ensure the boy found his way safely. Do you like school, Harry? Asked Remus, on their walk. It's okay. He shrugged, holding his new rucksack tighter in his hands. Last year I was at 3 different schools and before that I was at school with Dudley. I never made any friends. You'll only be at this school for the term. If I can get it all sorted and you're adopted, you'll go to the special magic school, Hogwarts, next term. I wish I could go now. I want to learn magic. I know, but it'll be good for you to go to a school close by and make a few friends before you go off to Hogwarts next year. I'm sure it will be all right. Harry stopped in his tracks on the way to the school and looked up. Did you ever go to Muggle school, Remus? No, I didn't. We moved around too much. With my condition, I was homeschooled. You wouldn't understand, then Harry said sadly. No one has ever wanted to be my friend. I'm sure that's not true, Remus said, watching Harry grimace. This time, you're not in a home of total strangers, nor do you have foster siblings or a cousin to tell others lies about you. No one knows you here, Harry. I still don't belong anywhere. You're not my real dad or even my real uncle. Harry slumped forward as he said this, and Remus felt the pang in his heart at the boy's words. Every word was true. Remus was neither Harry's true father or uncle. But, by Merlin, he was trying, and the words stung all the same. I know I'm not, Remus said quietly. I'm trying to be something I'm not, and I know that. But, if you let me try, I want to be at least like an uncle to you. I would never try to replace your father, you know. You should have grown up calling me Uncle Moony. Harry stopped in his tracks again. Moony. Remus chuckled. Sometimes I forget how little I've told you. For every one piece of information I give you, there are at least 10 more I've forgotten. When you come home from school today, I'll tell you all about our nicknames. Moony was mine. Harry was mollified with the answer, seemingly content to have something to look forward to. They walked a short distance further, arriving just beyond the gate of the school. Do you want me to walk in with you to the classroom? Asked Remus. It's my first time here, too. Harry shook his head. No, everyone will think I'm a loser if I have to be walked in. Remus clenched his jaw, deciding against offering another piece of unwanted advice or counsel. All right, Harry. If that's what you'd like. My dad will be here at the end of the day to come get you. Is that okay, or should I have him stay home? Harry looked uncertain. Remus saw his eyes darting around to the other children and their parents, dropping them off with hugs and kisses on their first day of school. Remus could see the longing in Harry's eyes, and he suddenly felt woefully inadequate as a guardian to James and Lily's son. I'll have my dad come. You deserve to have someone walk you home. Harry nodded feebly, still looking wistfully at the other families. He began to turn away, and Remus felt the breath hitch in his throat. Harry. Harry turned back and Remus opened his arms, hoping the boy wouldn't reject him. To Remus' immense relief, Harry hugged Remus tightly, as Remus placed his hand on Harry's head, holding him closer. I know I'm not perfect, but I'm trying, Remus said quietly. I know I'm not your father, and I never will be, but I do love you, Harry. Harry backed away, startled. Remus wondered if he had said too much, but Harry's shy smile gave him hope it had been all right. Harry gave Remus one more hug before he ran off into the building, and Remus let out a relieved sigh, glad for another positive interaction. Remus, could I get your help on my homework please? Asked Harry. He was clutching a large piece of paper in his hands, looking uncomfortable. Remus had a moment of panic, wondering what the school had assigned now. In a matter of weeks, he had been forced to brush up on Muggle British history, mathematics, and science. Bring it here, Remus said kindly. Let's see what Mrs. Hughes has assigned today. Harry brought the paper forward, and Remus glanced at a relatively empty page with the outline of a tree. It's a family tree, Harry said. It's for history, to know our own history, but I don't know mine. We're supposed to put pictures too. At least I have some now. Remus looked at the boxes available for parents, aunts and uncles, grandparents, and more. He shuddered to think what this assignment might have been like if he had been with the other foster parents or with the Dursleys. I can help you with this, Remus said. I didn't know much about your mum's family, but I certainly knew your dad's. Harry looked instantly relieved, and put the paper tree on the kitchen table, holding a Muggle pencil in hand. Over the next hour, they filled out the tree with Harry's parents' names and pictures. Remus had charmed them to stay still. From the few wedding pictures Remus had, he was able to find images of Harry's 4 grandparents, and placed them on the tree as well. Next to Lily's name, Harry reluctantly put Petunia's name and face, with a drawn-in face for Vernon and Dudley. Harry bit the end of the pencil, staring at the space next to James. He was humming lightly, a habit Remus noticed meant he was anxious. What's on your mind, Harry? Can I put your name here? Harry asked, pointing to the space next to James, where an aunt or uncle should be. Remus cleared his throat, feeling uneasy. I know you're not my, real uncle, but I told everyone you were, Harry mumbled. I didn't want them to think I was a foster kid again. You're not mad, are you? No, I'm not mad, Remus said slowly. I don't mind, either. But I do hope that next term, when you're at Hogwarts, you don't feel the need to lie about your family. Harry hesitated, hovering the pencil over the space next to James. Instead of writing Remus' name next to James, Harry drew another line from his own name to the space. He crossed out the title aunt/uncle and replaced it with Remus Lupin. Harry then drew one more line beyond Remus, and drew a circle, labeling it Lyle Lupin. I know you're not my real adoptive dad, either, but if Uncle Vernon gets to be on here, so do you, Harry said, tracing the lines around Remus and Lyle's names. Remus was genuinely moved by Harry's desire to include him and his father in the family tree, and struggled to find the right words to say. Your mum's name was Hope, wasn't it? Harry asked, as Remus nodded. Harry drew a line next to Lyle's name and created another circle, putting Hope's name inside of it. That's better, he said softly, as he traced the lines from his own name to his makeshift family. Is this what you'd like, Harry? To be adopted by me? Remus asked, his chin quivering with emotion. Only if you still want me, Harry said, in a small voice. Remus couldn't help himself, and he wrapped his arms around Harry, holding him tightly. Of course I do, Harry, Remus said. I am so sorry I didn't check on you sooner. If I had known then what I know now. Harry tensed for a moment, but let his shoulders relax, startling Remus. Before he could ask if the boy was all right, Harry was already packing his things for the next day. Confused by the abrupt change in his behavior, Remus wished him a good night. After the conversation on Harry's family tree, things went back to normal. Harry hadn't spoken of his sudden tenseness, and Remus hadn't mentioned it, either. It was now approaching Halloween, one of Remus' least favorite occasions. As a child, he'd been rather fond of the chocolate he would get from the holiday, but after the Potters' deaths in 1981, he could hardly think of Halloween without outright fury over what had transpired. It was made worse this year, upon realizing what had become of Harry Potter since that fateful night. Harry had been asking more questions about his parents. He had once mentioned in passing that he'd been told his parents had died in a car crash. Remus had told him it wasn't the truth, but had yet to tell Harry the awful tale that led to his parents' demise. Deciding that it was now or never, especially once Harry was on his way to Hogwarts, Remus decided Halloween 1990 would be as good a time as any to take Harry to see his parents' graves, the remains of their home, and to tell him what really happened to them. Halloween that year was on a school night, a new term Remus had learned since being introduced to the Muggle world of education. Remus had taken the day off to walk Harry both to and from school, with the intention of having Harry change out of his uniform and into casual clothes for their trip to Godric's Hollow. Can we go trick-or-treating later? Harry asked. I never got to go before. I think we can make that work, Remus said lightly. I can transfigure your clothes for a costume later. There's somewhere I'd like to take you first, remember? Harry nodded solemnly. Remus had sat him down a few days before to tell him that on Halloween, they would be apparating to the place his parents had died, so he could learn the truth. Change and eat, and then we'll go. Harry rushed off to his room to change, and Remus sat back in the kitchen, running his hands through his hair anxiously. You sure this is a good idea, son? Lyle asked. Not too young. He'll be off at Hogwarts next year. It's better he learn from me than the other children. Lyle sat down across from Remus. You seem to know what you're doing with him. I'm bloody terrified most days that I'm doing something wrong, Remus confessed. Is this how you and Mum felt? Most days, yes, Lyle said wryly. But then your child does something wonderful and it makes it all worth it. Remus felt a warmth in his chest, more grateful than ever that his parents had given him every opportunity to give him a better life. It was then that Harry appeared in the kitchen, looking for something to eat. Steak and kidney pie. Remus offered. Harry nodded hungrily, and sat down at the table while waiting for Remus to provide an early supper. Harry ate quickly, as usual. When he had finished eating, he asked, Did my parents like steak and kidney pie? Your dad liked almost everything, Rumus chuckled. Though I don't think he cared for tripe. Your mum, we didn't get to know her till we were a little older. She was good at cooking, though. Made the best pies, sweet or savory. Her mincemeat pies were my favorite. Harry looked at the remains of his pie wistfully, and Rumus felt a pang in his stomach. He was almost certain he knew what Harry was thinking, and he too wished that the pie he'd just eaten had been prepared by Lily Potter. Rumus cleared his throat, and gestured for Harry to get up. It would be a long afternoon, and Rumus didn't want to stay out later than they needed to be. With a few minutes' preparation, they were soon on their way to Godric's Hollow. Harry had, by now, preferred apparating to other methods of wizarding travel. Rumus was certain that once he learned of the Floo network, the night bus, and broomsticks, Harry would prefer something else, but apparating was easy enough for Rumus to do with the two of them. They appeared with a crack just outside Godric's Hollow. Rumus led the way until they were at the Kissing Gate to the cemetery. Do you remember why we came here today, Harry? My parents died on Halloween, Harry replied softly. Yes, they did. We're going to see their graves now. You've never been here before, have you? Harry shook his head. Aunt Petunia said their bodies were blown up in the crash. Rumus steadied himself before his anger exploded. He began to wonder if he would ever uncover the entirety of the lies the Dursleys had fed Harry over the years. Your parents didn't die in a car crash, and they certainly weren't blown up, Rumus said gently, struggling to keep his voice level. I was at their funeral and burial. We're going to see their graves now. Rumus opened the gate and led Harry to the spot where Lily and James Potter were buried. Harry stood, transfixed, and traced his finger over his parents' names and dates of birth. I didn't even know their birthdays, Harry said quietly. Aunt Petunia never told me. Well, now you know. Your mum's was in January, and your dad's was a few weeks after mine, in March. We often celebrated together when we were at school. What does this mean? Harry asked, pointing to the inscription on their headstone. The last enemy that shall be destroyed is death. It means that death won't be an enemy anymore, Rumus explained. Do you remember the tale of the three brothers from the Tales of Beedle the Bard? Yeah. The last brother welcomed death as a friend. That's what this inscription means. Instead of being afraid of death or hating it, we say it's not our enemy anymore. Death is a part of life. Oh. It's all right if you don't understand it fully. I don't either, Rumus said, squeezing Harry's shoulder. Is there anything you want to say while we're here? Can they hear me? Harry looked up at Rumus, with his face full of hope. They might be able to, Rumus said uneasily. Sometimes people feel their loved ones will reply to them. Harry traced his fingers over his parents' names once more, and sighed. I don't think I have anything to say. I didn't really know them, anyway. They loved you so much, Harry. You were their whole world. I think it's time to tell you what happened to them. Are you ready? Harry looked back at Rumus. Yes. Chapter 5, Truth. Notes. Posting a day early so I can get ahead on my other major WIP. Thank you for reading / leaving kudos or commenting. Always so appreciated. Happy Smiley. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. Harry walked next to Rumus on their way to the remains of his first home. He saw other children emerging from their homes with costumes for trick-or-treating, longing to return to Cardiff so he could do so too. Aunt Petunia had never let him go, and Dudley would usually eat his sweets in front of Harry to taunt him. We're almost there, Harry, Rumus said. Once we're done, we'll get your sweets, all right? Harry nodded enthusiastically. As nice as it had been to see his parents' names and graves, it was hard to mourn them. He had never known his parents, and while Rumus had assured him that his parents had not died as a result of a drunken car crash, he often wondered what kind of people they had been. Rumus slowed down and stopped in front of an empty lawn. Harry looked up at him in confusion. Look closely for a few moments, and you'll see it, Rumus said softly. Harry stared at the lawn, and in an instant, it changed to something both mesmerizing and horrifying. A two-story cottage, surrounded by an overgrown hedge, stood before him. A memorial sign appeared, bearing a message. On this spot, On this night of the 31st of October 1981, Lily and James Potter lost their lives. Their son, Harry, remains the only wizard ever to have survived the killing curse. This house, invisible to Muggles, has been left in its ruined state as a monument to the Potters and as a reminder of the violence that tore apart their family. The killing curse? Harry asked as he traced the letters on the memorial. What's that? It is what killed your parents, Remus said solemnly. Not a car crash. They were killed by a very dark wizard. Do you see that room up there? Remus pointed up to what appeared to be a child's bedroom. Harry found faintly see an alphabet mural on the wall. My room, Harry murmured. Yes. There was a dark wizard, and he killed your parents in this cottage. Remus inhaled deeply, and put a hand on Harry's shoulder. Would you like to walk around? I believe we should be able to. Harry nodded, and he felt a similar warmth when they went through the rusted gate as he did when he came home to the Lupins. He now recognized it as protective enchantments surrounding a home. I used to visit your parents here every now and then, Remus said quietly. Not as often as I wanted, in that time. They had a small garden, right around here. He led Harry towards the back of the house, where an overgrown, wild garden was thriving. Harry could barely take his eyes off the ruins of his first home. He saw the front door, and imagined what it might have been like to open that door every morning and afternoon as he went to and from school. He imagined his mother greeting him in the kitchen, with one of the pies Remus had said she was good at making, with vegetables from the garden. Harry could have helped in the garden because he wanted to, not because he'd have been forced to. Perhaps his father would be there, too, waiting for Harry to come home from school. Instead of a scowl, he'd be greeted by their warm, loving smiles, and then they'd eat dinner together, as a proper family. He brushed away the tears that had formed in his eyes, longing for a life he could have had. Harry. Why don't we sit here, and I'll tell you about what happened. Remus had brushed away branches from an iron garden bench, making room for the two of them to sit. They faced the cottage from there, on the side that had not been ruined but by now was half covered with ivy. To tell you about what happened to your parents, I need to tell you about the wizarding world in the years leading up to your birth, Remus began, his voice heavy with emotion. There was a war in the 1970s. It had been building for some time, but by the time you were born, it was in full swing. You see, Harry, just like Muggles, wizards have problems too. Remus inhaled deeply again and continued. There was a dark wizard called Lord Voldemort. Harry's brow knitted together. Voldemort. Yes, Lord Voldemort. Many people were so afraid of him that they were afraid of saying his name. When you go to Hogwarts next year, people won't call him Voldemort. They will call him you-know-who or he who must not be named, because people are still afraid of him and everything he did, Remus said. I call him Voldemort, but even my father doesn't. Harry's brows went up into his forehead. Why were people so afraid of him? He did terrible things, Harry. Terrible, evil, wrong things, Remus explained. Do you remember when I talked about purebloods, half-bloods, and Muggleborns? Harry nodded, remembering the conversation well. His mother had come from a Muggle family, which meant only Lily could do magic. His father had come from a pureblood family. Harry was a half-blood, as was Remus. Both Lyle and Remus had been insistent that one's blood had nothing to do with their ability to do magic or be a good witch or wizard. Some people, Voldemort included, thought that it mattered what kind of wizarding blood someone had, Remus said. He thought that only pureblood witches and wizards were important, and thought that Muggleborns were making wizarding society worse. It's all rubbish, Harry. You must remember that. Harry agreed. It reminded him of his history lessons, where people were prejudiced because of others' skin color. He recalled being shocked that wizards could be the same way, only with blood. A lot of people disagreed with Voldemort and his followers, who were called Death Eaters. You need to understand that even though people disagreed with Voldemort, he was a powerful wizard who had many supporters, Remus elaborated. His supporters had a lot of money, power, and status. Many of his supporters believed the same idea, that someone's blood meant they were more or less valuable. Your parents disagreed with his ideas, as did I, Remus said evenly. There was a small group of people who opposed Voldemort. He was doing everything in his power to take over the wizarding world in Britain, and that's where you come in. Me? Harry asked dubiously. I was only a baby. Remus looked down, and Harry could see that the man was struggling to speak. I'm sorry, Harry, it's hard to discuss, but you deserve the truth, Remus said hoarsely. He cleared his throat and shook his head. There was a prophecy given before you were born. Harry's expression must have given away his bewilderment, as Remus shook his head again. Prophecies are made by seers, a special kind of witch or wizard who can see what may happen in the future. It isn't guaranteed, but some people pay more attention to prophecies than others. This prophecy, which I don't know the details of, said something about Voldemort's defeat. Remus cleared his throat again and wiped something from his eye. The prophecy said that a child born right around the time you were born would grow up to defeat Voldemort. Harry gasped, staring at Remus in shock. Harry. Defeating a dark, evil wizard. I wouldn't worry much about it, Harry, Remus said, placing his hand on Harry's shoulder and giving it a light squeeze. Voldemort's gone now. You did defeat him, even if you can't remember it. Harry was sitting upright, rapt with attention. How, was all he managed to say as he learned this part of his history. I'll get to that. Remus brought his hands together, bending over as if bracing himself for something terrible. When we learned that Voldemort knew about the prophecy, there were a couple families who could have been affected. Yours was one of them, since you were born at the right time. Your parents went into hiding in this cottage with you. There was a special charm placed on the house to make it invisible to anyone but their secret keeper. Remus clenched his jaw and fists now, startling Harry at his sudden show of aggression. Give me a moment, Harry, Remus said tightly. This is hard for me, too. Harry was growing more concerned by the minute at how much Remus had been affected by what happened. Right. The secret keeper. There's a man called Sirius Black who was our friend, Remus said, his voice edging on a growl. We thought he was our friend. Remember that, Harry? He had been one of our best friends in school and, Remus scrunched his eyes together and clenched his fists again. After a few more deep breaths, he continued. He was your godfather, Harry, Remus said, through gritted teeth, as Harry's jaw dropped. He'd always wondered why he had been with the Dursleys for so long, no one had mentioned a godfather. What hap? Harry began, and Remus put his hand up as he put his other fist over his lips. Sirius Black was your godfather, Harry, and he was your parents' secret keeper. No one could get the location from the secret keeper unless the keeper tells it himself or herself, Remus said, his voice cracking with emotion. The reason Sirius Black is no longer my friend, and why he is nowhere near you, Harry, is that he betrayed your parents. He told Voldemort where to find you and your family. Remus' chin was quivering, but his jaw was set and his eyes were burning with fury. Harry had never heard of Sirius Black before, but just thinking of the man was enough to make Harry hate him for betraying his family. When Voldemort got the location of this cottage, Harry, he came for you, because the prophecy said you could defeat him, Remus continued, breathing hard. Your parents trusted that Sirius would never share their secret. They were wrong. We were all wrong. Remus let a dry sob escape from his throat before rubbing his eyes with his hands. Your parents weren't expecting Voldemort. He was after you, and of course your parents loved you. They would have never given you over to him, Remus said, his breathing steadying as they moved on from Harry's godfather. Your father was probably killed first. Voldemort used something called the Killing Curse, one of the most evil spells known in our world. There is no cure and no way to reverse it. No one but you has survived it. Harry's head was spinning with information. His parents had died to save him, and their best friend had betrayed them. He almost wished his parents had died in a car crash. The truth was much darker. After Voldemort killed your father, he went upstairs looking for you, we think. Your mother died next, protecting you with her own body. Then, Voldemort turned to you, and cast the Killing Curse on you, but it backfired. What? How? Harry asked, in a strained voice. No one knows, Remus said. He looked Harry in the eye, and then up at his forehead. That scar is the only evidence on your body that Voldemort tried to kill you. Somehow, you survived and the curse backfiring led to Voldemort's defeat. The prophecy came true, we think, and Voldemort's gone. Harry sat in still silence, wondering how he'd survived the Killing Curse. He wasn't anything but ordinary, he thought. He had average marks at school, he wasn't very big or strong for his age, and he wasn't especially talented. Maybe we'll know one day why this happened, Remus murmured. But for now, it's important to know that you survived, Harry. What happened to Sirius Black? Harry asked, after a few more moments of silence. Remus stiffened, but after a few more deep breaths, spoke again. He went after our friend Peter, to kill him. He might have wanted to kill us all, Remus said, his voice tight and filled with quiet fury. He went to Peter first. He killed 12 Muggles before he finally got Peter. Sirius didn't just kill Peter, Harry. He blew him up and all that was left were 2 fingers. Harry gasped, horror-struck by the idea that his parents' best friend, his godfather, had killed innocent people and blown an innocent man up. He was caught and sent to the wizarding prison, Azkaban, without a trial. He confessed to the murders that very night, and I haven't seen or spoken to him again, Remus said bitterly. After that, you were sent off to live with the Dursleys and I never saw you again, either, until now. As Harry thought about the horrors that occurred in the cottage before him and all that he had lost that night without knowing it, he looked back at Remus. He recalled Remus' words, spoken moments before. I never saw you again, either. Why didn't you come see me? Harry said quietly, his own anger welling up. You were their friend too, weren't you? Yes, but... But what? Why didn't you come see me? Why was I taken to the Dursleys? Harry asked, his own fists clenching now. You were taken to the Dursleys because your aunt was your mother's sister. They were your only living relatives, Remus said uneasily. That's what Professor Dumbledore arranged and wanted for you. I don't care what the professor wanted. I don't even know the professor. Harry cried. Why didn't you come see me, Remus? Why did you leave me there? Harry, I didn't, they were your family. I wasn't, Remus said lamely. I couldn't have. If you could take me now, why didn't you take me before? Harry screamed. Why did they leave me? Please, Harry, it wasn't Remus began, but Harry didn't want to listen. He felt the tears forming in his eyes, furious and hurt by the knowledge that he'd been taken to the Dursleys to suffer, when other people like Remus were still alive and could have cared for him. Harry began running as fast as his legs could take him in the opposite direction from Remus. Harry! No! Remus shouted. Come back! He kept running, until something hit him in the back, and he felt himself fall over into unconsciousness. When Harry opened his eyes, he was back in his bed at the Lupins. He grabbed his eyeglasses from the nightstand, and as soon as he put them on, he saw the rest of the room come into focus. Remus was sitting in a chair, staring intently at him with red-rimmed eyes and a somber expression. Are you all right, Harry? Remus asked quietly. What happened? Harry croaked. Remus inhaled sharply. I stunned you. Why? Harry furrowed his brow. He had been told stunning was usually for defense. He hadn't recalled being violent. You were running away from me. Do you remember why? Remus bit his bottom lip, looking searchingly into Harry's face. Harry closed his eyes and willed himself to remember the end of their conversation in Godric's Hollow. He had been furious with Remus for allowing him to rot away at the Dursleys, when he could have grown up with the Lupins the entire time. Yes, he said, in barely more than a whisper. Remus took in another sharp breath. I understand if you're still angry with me, Harry, but please don't ever run away from me again. You ran away from me first, Harry said flatly, as Remus' face fell and pain crossed over his features. I did, and I can only say I'm terribly sorry for that. You must know it wasn't a conscious choice. Remus looked uncomfortable, but Harry didn't care. He was still livid that he had been left with the Dursleys for years. You left me with the Dursleys? Yes and no. Professor Dumbledore arranged that for you, as your aunt was your mother's only living relative. Your father had no living relatives, Remus said, as he took another steadying breath. I don't think any of us thought your living conditions with them could have been so deplorable. Harry was trembling now with anger, attempting to control his temper and magic so that a window wouldn't break. Why didn't anyone come to see me? I can't speak for others, but I can say that I was very sad at the time. I thought you were in good hands with your family. Rumor's tone of voice was apologetic, but it did little to mollify Harry's rage. "But I wasn't," he retorted. "No, you weren't. I see that now, and I'm working hard to make sure your life is better now." Rumors paused, looking down at his shoes, before looking back up into Harry's eyes. "I am sorry I never saw you earlier, more sorry than you could ever imagine." Harry said nothing while contemplating Rumor's apology. He felt it could never be enough to make up for the years of suffering he'd endured with the Dursleys and then at the group homes. Rumors cleared his throat, calling Harry out of his thoughts. "If you would like, Harry, I can write to Professor Dumbledore to find out why you were put there in the first place. I know your Aunt Petunia was your only living relative, but I wonder why you weren't put with a wizarding family." Harry had heard of this Professor Dumbledore before from both Remus and Lyle. They spoke highly of the man and he'd even collected his chocolate frog card. He had now grown suspicious of the supposedly great wizard for leaving him in such a terrible situation for so many years. After a few moments of thought, Harry muttered, "Fine." Remus exhaled in obvious relief, and stood from his chair. He made his way to the threshold of the door to the bedroom. He turned around and said, "Harry." "What?" Harry snapped. "I have one more thing to apologize for," Remus said sheepishly. "It's too late for trick-or-treating." Harry didn't have it in his heart to care, and turned over in his bed silently, still angry at the world for taking his parents and life away from him so cruelly. Over the next few days, Harry ignored Remus in favor of Lyle. He didn't care that Remus was trying to talk to him or interact with him. Remus had ignored Harry for years and left him at the Dursleys to suffer. Lyle took over most of Harry's care at that point, taking him both to and from school, helping with his assignments, and ensuring his needs were met. It was unsurprising, then, when Lyle came to wake Harry the Saturday morning after Halloween. What was surprising, however, came with Lyle's announcement. "Harry. It's time to get up, son," Lyle said, from the doorway. "We've got company." Harry furrowed his brow and put his glasses on. "We do? Who?" "The headmaster from Hogwarts is here to see you. Remus asked him to come over to explain a few things to you." Harry scowled and turned back to his bed. "I don't want to talk to anyone." "I know you don't, Harry, but give Professor Dumbledore and Remus a chance to explain themselves," Lyle said gently. He came into Harry's room and sat at the end of the bed. "Sometimes the people who are important to us make mistakes, Harry." Harry was growing irritated. Remus and the professor didn't make mistakes, they left Harry to suffer with the Dursleys for years. Harry couldn't put a word to it, but it felt like far more than a simple mistake to him. "Can I tell you about my biggest mistake?" Lyle said. "It has to do with Remus being a werewolf." "Everything to do with it, actually." Harry was slightly curious about Lyle's hand in Remus' lycanthropy, but he didn't want to appear too eager, and so stayed still under the covers. "I'll take your silence as reason for me to continue," Lyle said. "You see, Harry, long ago, when Remus was not even 5 years old, I worked at the Ministry of Magic. There was a man who came in who we thought had hurt children. He convinced my co-workers that he was just a muggle in the wrong place at the wrong time. I didn't believe him and could see who he was a werewolf." Lyle took a steadying breath. "My co-workers wanted to obligate him and let him go on his way, but I wanted to keep him until the full moon, which was the next day. They told me to stick with what I knew, Bogarts, and I got angry. I lost my temper, and I called werewolves soulless, evil, deserving nothing but death." Harry ripped off the covers instantly, now rapt with attention at Lyle's tale. Lyle loved Remus. Why would he say such a thing? "I know, Harry. This was just before Remus was bitten," Lyle said sommily. "We let the werewolf go and he overpowered the people who were supposed to modify his memory. As you can imagine, this werewolf didn't forget what I said." Lyle wiped a tear from the corner of his eye with the back of his hand. "The werewolf was called Fenrir Greyback, and the next day, at the full moon, he came for revenge. It would have been better if he had killed me, but instead he bit my son. I was able to save Remus' life, but not without a cost. My beautiful boy became a werewolf, and there was nothing I could do to stop it." Lyle was hunched over now and Harry was staring at him, wide-eyed and disbelieving. "You see, Harry, I made a grave mistake in offending Fenrir Greyback, and it was my son who suffered most from it. Lyle wiped away another tear from his cheek. I didn't tell Remus about the truth of how and why he was bitten because I was ashamed of myself for doing this to him. He found out anyway, many years later, and he was furious with me for keeping the truth from him. I made a mistake. I made many mistakes, and it's taken a long time for me to have a good relationship with my son. I love him and I believe he loves me, but we had a difficult relationship for most of the last 10 years. He was unhappy for many reasons. Lyle put a comforting hand on Harry's shoulder, and sighed heavily. I don't know what my son's life was like for the last decade, but I don't believe he wanted to avoid you. If you're willing, I think both he and Professor Dumbledore would like to speak with you. You don't have to talk to them, if you don't want to. It might do you good to tell them how you feel, and be honest with them, Lyle said, now rising from the foot of the bed. We'll be waiting for you whenever you're ready. Harry watched Lyle leave the room and close the door behind him, leaving him alone in his bed. He felt pity for Lyle that moment, for being partly to blame for Remus' lycanthropy. He sometimes wondered why Remus and Lyle didn't always get along. They were always civil and pleasant when Harry was in the room, but he was able to tell when there was unspoken tension between them. He swung his legs over the side of the bed and stood, stretching himself out. It wouldn't do him any good to stay sulking in his room as he had been for days. Perhaps, if the professor and Remus were able to admit to their mistakes as Lyle had, he might feel better. He dressed himself carefully in one of his newer shirts and a newer pair of trousers, and threw on his favorite jumper. He wasn't sure what the professor was like, but upon hearing he was the headmaster of the school Harry would be attending next term, he didn't want to make a bad impression. Once dressed, Harry went out to the living room to find Lyle in his favorite armchair, while Remus was sitting on the floor playing gobstones with a man who looked as if he belonged in a Muggle fairy tale. He had a long, silver beard, resplendent, shimmery purple robes, and half-moon spectacles. He had a plate of crumpets levitating next to him, which seemed to amuse Lyle. Harry, Lyle said, upon raising his eyes to find him at the threshold of the living room. Both Remus and the professor turned to Harry. Remus looked relieved, while the professor was gazing at Harry, making him feel as if the older wizard could read his mind. "Hello, Harry," the professor said. "I am Professor Albus Dumbledore, the headmaster of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. It is a pleasure to see you again." "You've met me before?" Harry asked dubiously. "Yes. The last time I saw you was almost 9 years ago exactly," Dumbledore replied. "We're meeting in very different circumstances this time." Harry bit his tongue to keep from lashing out at Dumbledore. The kindly-looking old man had been the one to leave him on the Dursleys' front step 9 years earlier. "I can see you've had a change in residence since that time," Dumbledore said simply. "Would you care to join me in playing gobstones?" Remus and Lyle nodded, and gestured for Harry to take over for Remus. Harry reluctantly joined Dumbledore on the floor and continued the game. "I understand you've been feeling frustrated lately," Harry, Dumbledore said quietly. "Could you tell me why? Why was I sent to the Dursleys?" "I hated them," Harry said flatly. "They hated me. I'm happy they're dead." Dumbledore was taken aback at Harry's bluntness, but Harry didn't care. Lyle had told him to be honest, and in truth, Harry didn't care that the Dursleys were dead. "I'm sure that they didn't hate you," Harry, Dumbledore said lightly, as Harry scowled. "People who hate you put you under the stairs to sleep. People who hate you give you burnt cake. They hated me and I hated them." Dumbledore looked somber, and the twinkle that had been in his eyes when he and Harry first began playing gobstones was now gone. "I'm sorry that happened to you, Harry. If I had known." "But you didn't. Remus didn't. Nobody came for me." Harry was fighting the tears that were welling up in his eyes. He was already screwing up his chance with the headmaster to make a good impression, he thought, panicked. Remus was sitting on the edge of his seat, being held back by his arm by Lyle. Remus made a peculiar, strangled noise from the back of his throat, but Lyle kept him in place. "What happened after your aunt and uncle died, Harry?" Dumbledore asked gently. "You were sent to live with your cousin and his aunt. Aunt Marge made me sleep in a doghouse for 2 days until she took me to children's services. I lived at 3 homes and nobody ever wanted me." Harry was sniffling now, and Dumbledore conjured tissues from the tip of his wand, offering them to him. Harry took the offered tissues and blew into them, coughing slightly from the effort of keeping back his tears. "That's when Remus found you, is that correct?" Dumbledore said, as Harry nodded. "You've been with the Lupins since June." "Yeah. Remus said he might adopt me." Harry looked down at the floor, feeling suddenly ashamed at how badly he'd treated Remus in the last few days. Remus had offered nothing but kindness for months, and now Harry feared he'd be turned back out to children's services for offending him. "Is that what you want, Harry?" Dumbledore asked kindly. "To be adopted by the Lupins?" Harry looked up at Dumbledore, whose eyes were twinkling merrily again. He then glanced at Remus and Lyle, who were both sitting upright, staring intently at Harry. "If they still want me," Harry murmured. "I haven't been very good lately, so maybe they don't want me anymore." Remus made another strangled noise from his throat, but Lyle held him back once more. "I will try to arrange something for you, Harry, but there's something you should know," Dumbledore said, his tone now shifting towards something more solemn. "Remus told me that you know your parents were killed by Lord Voldemort." Harry nodded, and pushed the bridge of his glasses upwards on his nose. "Your mother threw herself in front of you to save you," Dumbledore continued. "Did you know that creates a special kind of magic?" Harry shook his head. He glanced at Remus and Lyle, who were both watching the scene vigilantly. "When your mother sacrificed her life for yours, she unknowingly invoked a type of magic based on love. She loved you to give her life for you, which meant it created a protective charm that flows in your veins," Dumbledore explained. "The blood you share with your mother makes you untouchable to Lord Voldemort. This is why the killing curse backfired." "He can't kill me?" Harry asked, scratching his head in confusion. "Because of love. Blood love." "More or less," Dumbledore replied. "The love your mother had for you flows in your veins, tied to your very life." "Do you know who else shared that blood?" Remus gasped and clapped his hand to his mouth while Lyle looked grave. Harry, still confused, turned to Dumbledore. "Your mother's sister and your cousin Dudley share that blood. When I placed you with your mother's family, it sealed that protective charm, making it the safest place for you to be." Harry gaped at Dumbledore. The home he'd suffered in for years was safe, because of his mother's love. Because of magic. "It is for this reason, Harry, that I'm going to disappoint you," Dumbledore said sadly. "You have to go back to them." "But they're dead," Harry shouted. "I can't go back." "Your cousin isn't. You must go back to him and Aunt Marge, I'm afraid, for your safety," Dumbledore said. Harry shook with rage. He couldn't go back. Not now. Not again. The last thing he heard was the shattering of glass all around him and a crackling sizzle in the distance, before he lost consciousness. "Albus, see reason!" Harry heard Remus shouting from his bedroom. His head was sore and his body reeked of Dittany, leading him to believe he'd hurt himself somehow in a burst of accidental magic again. He was exhausted, but strained against the covers to better hear the adults' conversation. "He needs safety," Dumbledore said something muffled here. "Dursleys are safest. Harry slept in a bloody doghouse there. We can't do this to him," Remus yelled. Lyle said something to Remus about staying calm. "Discuss an arrangement with Marge Dursley, I'm sure," Dumbledore said calmly. "Gee, reason, 2 weeks." Harry was growing impatient with his inability to hear their conversation, and crept out of his bed towards the door. He pressed his ear against it, hoping to hear more. "But that would mean we couldn't adopt him," Remus said dejectedly. "Perhaps it's for the best," Lyle offered. "The Ministry won't take to us raising him." "Sod the Ministry!" Remus shouted. "This isn't any child, it's Harry." Harry's chest grew warm at Remus' defense. He felt ashamed he'd pushed the man away after Halloween when it was obvious he only wanted to help him. "This will be easier to defend than the current situation," Dumbledore replied. "You know he won't be away for long. He will return." Harry perked up at this. He didn't mind the idea of leaving the Lupins if he could come back. Once he was away at Hogwarts, he could always come back to Remus and Lyle for holidays. "Then we'll use the Fidelius charm, whatever it takes," Remus retorted. "I'm not seeing him go back there." Harry heard the sound of a throat being cleared, and Lyle's low, calming voice again. "We can talk to the women ourselves and see if we can make an arrangement. It will be difficult, but we can try. I believe she will be amenable when she understands what is at stake, Dumbledore said, as someone snorted loudly. Remus, please, Lyle said pleadingly. We need to do what is best for Harry. You can't be serious. Be my guests. Go see her and tell me you really think he's better off there, Remus growled. Harry heard the stomping of feet, and the loud, heavy sigh that followed it. We should have planned this for next weekend, but he insisted it would be fine, Lyle said. Full moon tonight, but he was adamant that this couldn't wait. He wanted the truth, and sometimes the truth isn't easy to accept, Dumbledore said. I'll manage the arrangements. Would you like me to tell Harry? It might be best coming from me, I should think, Lyle replied. Let me know when and where we're needed. Thank you, Lyle. I must be off now. Expect my I'll. Harry heard further footsteps and decided to return to his bed. His head was spinning with the events of the afternoon. Before he could get under the covers once more, someone was knocking on his door. He looked up to see Lyle, more tired-looking than usual, enter the bedroom and sit on the desk chair. Do I really have to go back? Harry squeaked, holding his worn baby blanket up to his chest. To them. It appears so, son. I'm sorry, Lyle said gently. We're going to figure it out for you, all right? Can I come back for my holidays? Harry asked. I heard I won't be away for long. I will return. Lyle's expression contorted into something both peculiar and pained. He cleared his throat and said, We will figure something out, I'm sure. You should rest now. You took another tumble again from your accidental magic. Harry wasn't convinced by Lyle's statement. The elder Lupin had promised neither a return to the Lupins nor what the arrangement, if any, would be for him at Marge's. Frustrated and scared, Harry curled up under his covers and clutched his old baby blanket to his chest, hoping it wouldn't be his last night at the Lupins just yet. Notes. If you like my writing, check out my time-traveling Tonks series. Part 1 titled The Nymph of House Black. It's what I'm currently pouring my heart and soul into. Once that's wrapped up, I'll be ramping up my writing on this fic. Chapter 6, Visits. Notes. Posting a little ahead of schedule today as I've got a mountain of midterms to grade. Also, happy birthday to our favorite werewolf, Remus Lupin. Have a super March 10 while you're at it. Chapter text. Remus woke in a fog. What had begun as a well-meaning idea to explain to Harry why he was placed with the Dursleys had turned into a nightmare involving Harry's forced removal from the Lupins. Harry had yet to leave the arrangements needed to be settled with Marge Dursley, but Remus was dreading the separation. Harry was vaguely aware of the upcoming departure, and Remus intended to keep it that way as long as he was able. Remus. Lyle's gruff voice called from the other side of the door. Dumbledore's here. I'll be a minute. Lyle shuffled away, and Remus dressed slowly. Harry would be spending the day with Lyle at the London Aquarium while Remus and Dumbledore settled things with Marge Dursley. Remus had hoped to give Harry one last positive experience before returning him to a place he knew the boy would be unhappy and unloved. Hello, Remus, Dumbledore greeted calmly. How are you? Fine. Let's get this over with. Dumbledore grimaced but murmured a few words into Lyle's ear before rising from the kitchen chair and joining Remus outside to apparate to Bedfordshire, where Marge and Dudley Dursley lived. This is a huge mistake, Albus Remus said bitterly. Harry doesn't belong there. It is for his protection. He will be safest with his cousin. Remus held back his own retorts and instead turned on his heel. A few moments later, he and Dumbledore were standing in front of the sign reading Marge's Majesties. The cottage was the same as ever, albeit under a thin layer of frost from the cooler November weather. The gravel crunched under their shoes as they approached the front door. Remus saw the wooden doghouse opposite the barn and growled. He had half a mind to set fire to it to prevent Marge Dursley from ever keeping Harry Potter in such deplorable conditions. Dumbledore and Remus went up the front steps and knocked on the door. A few moments went by before a large, round-faced, blond boy Remus now knew was Dudley Dursley opened the door. You two here for the bitches? Dudley asked. Excuse me. Remus said, affronted. The bitches, lady and princess. From the advert. Dudley repeated. £100 each. We're here to see your aunt, Marge, Dumbledore said. She should be expecting us. Oh. Marge. Two blokes for you. Dudley bellowed behind him. Remus winced as a heavyset woman came wheezing from behind Dudley. You two from the school? I am Professor Albus Dumbledore. I wrote to you, and this is my friend, Remus Lupin, Dumbledore introduced. Is this still a good time? Marge grunted a reply, and Dudley moved out of the way to allow Remus and Dumbledore entry. The cottage itself was clean and neat, though covered in frilly, bulldog-themed decorations. It wasn't cozy in the way the Lupins' home was, but it would suffice as adequate living space for Harry, thought Remus. Once tea was served, Marge, Dudley, Dumbledore, and Remus sat